Hello guys, this is your friend Naruto Audio Fanfics and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto refused to be weak ever again, and Hinata, Ino, Temari, Yugito, Anko and Samui fell for him part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto and Shizune walked at a steady pace as they made their way to the hotel in the center of town. You shouldn't judge her too hard. Lady Tsunade has had a hard life. I'm surprised she even put that necklace on the line for your bet. Shizune had spoken in defense of her master. What's so special about the necklace aside from the sentimental value? Asked the curious blonde. The raven-haired women took a moment to respond as the pair made their way through the crowds of people. That necklace is cursed. The blonde raised an eyebrow at the older woman, a silent prompt for her to explain. She received that necklace when her grandfather, Lord Hashirama, died during the First War. She passed down the necklace to her younger brother Naoki when he told her his dream was to become Hokage like their grandfather. The blonde's eyebrow stayed raised. It was a way to show him that he believed in his dream. This was right at the beginning of the Second War. Tsunade's brother Naoki died the very next day. Naruto stayed silent as he listened to the story, occasionally nodding to show that he was paying attention. This caused her to advocate for at least one medical ninja to be on a squad to prevent more battlefield deaths. She campaigned for her cause for months, but the council said it would be too difficult to train new medics properly, especially during a war. She was in a horrible depression for months until she met my Uncle Dan. The two shared the same goal of having a medical ninja on every squad. My mother had died on a mission and Uncle Dan always blamed himself for not being there to heal her when she got hurt. He agreed with Lady Tsunade that if every squad had a healer many lives could be saved. They dated for a year before becoming engaged. Shizune took another breath before continuing her tale. Eventually Uncle Dan told Lady Tsunade about his dream of being Hokage. Naruto was starting to see a pattern. She gave him her necklace one final time to show her support of his dream. Shizune had a sad smile on her face. He died in her arms a week later. His team had managed to drag him back to the Leaf Village gates where Lady Tsunade began to heal him after his squad was attacked. She managed to stop his bleeding, but it was too late. He had lost too much blood. Lady Tsunade developed hemophobia after that moment, a fear of blood. Naruto frowned when he heard that. So now Lady Tsunade thinks anyone who isn't her that wears the necklace will die. Smart. Either she wins, takes my money and never sees me, or she gives me a necklace that will kill me. Shizune started waving her arms around in a panic. No, it's just that you remind her of them. Your dream of being Hokage must have made her nostalgic. She wouldn't try to curse you. Naruto waved her off. I was kidding. I don't believe in something like a curse. It doesn't change anything though. At the end of the day, she gave up instead of continuing to fight for her dream and mocked all her loved ones when she spits on the title of Hokage. The two were quiet as they made it to the hotel. There were people of various ages scurrying along as Naruto rented a room for the next couple of days. If it makes you feel better, I'll prove the curse wrong when I win the bet. Shizune, who had been in a somber mood, smiled as she made her way to her room as her pig following behind her. Naruto went to a nearby store once he had seen his room. He bought 4 packs of 100 balloons and went to a clearing close to town. Naruto created 50 clones and handed them a bag of balloons. Naruto himself started working on his physical training to work on his speed as he thought of all his recent encounters. First Orochimaru, then Itachi and Kisame. I can't keep up with them. If they hadn't been playing around with me I'd be dead. The whiskered blonde spent the remaining daylight out in the clearing training. At sundown, the blonde dispelled all his clones and tested a Rasengan to see how far he had gotten. Naruto saw he could form the Rasengan in about 5 seconds, could hold it together for another 15 before it destabilized. Good job, kid. It took me 6 months to learn that jutsu and the fourth 3 years to make. Jiraiya was on top of a boulder with his notebook out as he wrote. Looks like you won the bet on the first day. Naruto shook his head at Jiraiya's statement. No, I need to perfect this jutsu. I need to be able to form it in a second and have it stabilized indefinitely. Jiraiya let out a whistle at the blonde's remark. That's a lofty goal. Under normal circumstances, It would take months to do that and you only have till the end of the week, which I remind you is 3 days from now. Naruto didn't say anything as he formed 10 clones and dispelled them as he raised his eyebrow at Jiraiya, who had a sweat drop forming on his head. Right, your shadow clone training. Let's go to the hotel for the night and rest up. Right, let's go. Naruto returned to the clearing for the next 2 days as he continued to train physically while his clones worked on forming the Rasengan. With the abuse of the shadow clone, Naruto had managed to form the Rasengan in 1.5 seconds and could hold it for 10 minutes straight. The training was pure chakra manipulation and was doing wonders for his control. Naruto meditated every night before bed and would try to coax his tenant into conversations. They were very one-sided as the fox rarely spoke. Naruto was in his room meditating when he was awakened from his meditation when his sensei entered the room. I'll be back later, kid. I'm going to go eat out with Tsunade tonight. Naruto barely acknowledged the old toad sage as he left, and soon after the blonde fell asleep. Naruto woke up when he sensed someone enters his hotel room. Not happening again, thought the blonde as he moved swiftly and grabbed the kunai he had stashed under his pillow. He jumped out of his bed and pushed the intruder into the wall with the kunai descending to the intruder's neck. The kunai stopped a millimeter from their jugular as Naruto saw who the intruder was. Shizune. What are you doing here? You're not trying to kill me, are you? The raven-haired woman was wide-eyed as she stared at the blonde in shock. Lady Tsunade is on her way to meet Orochimaru. I was trying to find Lord Jiraiya but I couldn't find him anywhere. Naruto grit his teeth in anger at the mention of the snake Sannin. We need to go after her. Orochimaru is hurt from his fight with Lord Third and sought her out to heal him. Naruto quickly changed from his sleepwear into his regular clothes. The two found Jiraiya slumped in the hallway. Lord Jiraiya, are you okay? Shizune rushed over to the white-haired Sannin. I'm fine. Tsunade slipped a drug into my drink last night. It's thrown my chakra control out of whack. Shizune placed her glowing green hands on his chest. I've accelerated the healing of the poison, but it's all I can do for now. Jiraiya nodded at the dark-haired medic as he got up slowly. Right, let's go, we don't have time to waste here, we need to find Tsunade. The trio quickly went out and followed Shizune to where Orochimaru told her and Tsunade he would be at to hear the female Sannin's answer. Naruto noticed it was a barren field with splotches of green here and there. There was the occasional boulder laying about as well, with a single tree sprinkled around. Off in the distance, the trio noticed Orochimaru, Tsunade, and Kabuto. The blonde saw Orochimaru was standing away from Tsunade and Kabuto. His hands were wrapped in bloody bandages, his arms hanging uselessly at his sides. Naruto could see the tips of his fingers sticking out of the bandages. They were a sickly deep dark purple in color. That's unnatural, thought Naruto as he noticed Kabuto had stabbed himself in the hand and splashed blood all over Tsunade, who froze. Damn it. What kind of medic is scared of blood? Naruto quickly body flickered in front of Tsunade as Kabuto came closer to finish her with his kunai. Naruto brought out his own kunai as he deflected the strike and tried to roundhouse Kabuto, who jumped back to stand next to Orochimaru. Shizune and Jiraiya landed beside the blonde as both sides stared each other down. Naruto saw the snake start to smile and he felt his blood boil as he started to subconsciously release killing intent. The snake Sannin's yellow eyes glowed with malice when they landed on Naruto. My, I didn't expect to see you here, Naruto. I got to say, you surprised me at the Chunin exams. All the information I had on you said you were the dead last. I was honestly impressed when you survived a strike from my Kusanagi. Orochimaru chuckled as Naruto grabbed his chest where his scar was. Naruto took his eyes off the traitor Sannin and glared at Kabuto. So you were working for the snake all along, huh, Kabuto? The youngest of the medics let out a smile as he lifted his glasses with his fingers, the sunlight reflecting off them obscuring his eyes. Indeed, I have been loyal to Lord Orochimaru since I was a small child. I must say you surprised me too. Out of you and Sasuke, one would assume the rookie of the year would be the first to be promoted instead of the orphaned loser. The blonde narrowed his eyes. Sasuke is an unstable child. Oh, and you're not. Lord Orochimaru told me what happened in the Forest of Death, how you were abandoned by your teammates even when you heroically came back to help them. Jiraiya had a concerned look in his eye as he glanced at his student. But, to be fair to your teammates, you were the most expendable one, and when compared to the treasure that is Sasuke, well. Kabuto shrugged as before continuing. There's a reason he's called a genius. The blonde's eyes shifted from his normal blue to purple as specks of red started to bleed through. His pupils becoming slits as his anger started to rise. Calm down. Naruto was snapped out of his anger by the voice of the Nine Tails. He took a deep breath as his eyes returned to their normal blue but remained as slits. Naruto dashed at the young medic and tried to take advantage of him still having his left hand damaged. He reached Kabuto, who attempted to kick him, but Naruto grabbed his leg and threw him away from Orochimaru. Naruto turned around just in time to cross his arms as he was sent flying by a kick from the snake Sannin. Naruto landed on his feet as he watched the two male Sannins engage in a taijutsu match. You keep impressing me, Naruto. The blonde turned from the two S-class ninjas fighting back to the young medic. Naruto let out a small tisk when he saw his arm was completely healed. Damn, thought Naruto. You've grown an incredible amount in such a short time. I can't allow you to get any stronger than you already have, you could be a real hindrance. You already messed with my master's plan during the Chunin exams. Kabuto blurred forward as he brought his glowing hand down to hit Naruto. The blonde was barely able to react in time as he jumped up. He coated his foot in earth chakra and axe kicked the medic. Kabuto grabbed him by the ankle and threw him at Shizune and Tsunade. Naruto tried to land on his feet only to notice he couldn't move his foot as pain shot through his leg. He rolled on the ground and quickly stood up as he created 10 clones. Kabuto saw he was favoring his left leg. I see you noticed. My chakra scalpel allows me to injure my foes from the inside. When I grabbed your ankle, I severed your Achilles tendon. Naruto felt the Nine Tails chakra move to his heel and felt the pain subside. Face it, Naruto, you'll never be Hokage. Shizune stood in front of the two blondes as she brought out her Senbon. Stay back, I'll handle this, protect Lady Tsunade. Naruto saw Shizune dash and soon the two entered a deadly dance as the two medics avoided the other's chakra scalpels. Naruto grit his teeth at being unable to keep with the older ninja's speed. First Orochimaru, then Itachi and Kisame. Now Kabuto too. I need to get faster. The blonde saw that Jiraiya had made a giant mud pit and as he avoided a super elongated sword from Orochimaru. Naruto looked back at the two medics and saw Kabuto had managed to catch Shizune on the shoulder as her arm fell to her side useless. Naruto threw a kunai at Kabuto, who caught it midair and threw it back. Naruto avoided it and Kabuto ran at the immobile Tsunade. Naruto body flicked in front of Kabuto, who was caught off guard that the blonde could move and received a right hook to the face because of it. The clones of the blonde took advantage and held Kabuto immobile. Hey, Tsunade, I won our bet. The blonde Sannin looked up for the first time as she saw the blonde holding out a perfect Rasengan. Naruto saw the Kabuto's eyes widen as Naruto slammed his Rasengan into his chest. The Rasengan tore through his shirt and ground away into his chest before he was blasted back into a boulder where he slumped down, blood dripping from his mouth. You know, you remind me a lot of Sensei and my uncle. They were always so serious and determined to never have anything stand in the way of their goals. Tsunade reaches into her shirt as she pulls out her necklace and puts it on him. You won the bet, brat. Tsunade reaches down and kisses his forehead. Naruto blushed for a second before his eyes widened. He pushes Tsunade away just as Orochimaru's body flickered next to the two blondes as he tried to impale them. The sword slashes the whiskered blonde's chest as he was thrown back several feet. Jiraiya appears beside the snake Sannin and kicks Orochimaru away. Tsunade, seeing the blonde bleeding, freezes for a split second before she rushes in to heal him. Naruto laid on the ground as the blonde Sannin closed his wound, the poison on Kusanagi, making it impossible to fully heal. That bastard has now ruined two of my favorite jackets. Naruto said as his bleeding stopped and was hugged by a shaking Tsunade. Why did you do that? I thought I had killed you by giving you the necklace. No. If anything, it saved my life. Naruto reached up with his right hand to hold the necklace. It deflected the initial stab and caused it to be a slash. Besides, you may not be living in the village anymore, but you're still a comrade and a member of the Leaf. I want to follow the steps of the third, and he taught me every member of the village is part of the Hokage's family. I would give up my life protecting them just like he did. Tsunade saw the pure fire of determination in his eyes as she nodded. Sarutobi Sensei died for nothing. Both blondes looked at the snake Sanin, who was next to a shaky Kabuto who was clutching his chest as he healed himself slowly. Explaining why Sensei died to you would be pointless, Jiraiya said as he landed between the blondes and his traitor teammate. You're right, I wouldn't understand why he would waste his life protecting that pathetic village. Naruto glared at the Sanin and watched as Tsunade blurred forward and delivered a devastating axe kick. The attack caused a massive crater on impact and it felt as though she caused an earthquake. The whiskered blonde's eyes widened at the size of the crater. I knew she had super strength, but this is ridiculous. Enough talk, Orochimaru. It's time to end this. Jiraiya stepped up next to Tsunade as Shizu rejoined Naruto behind their senseis. That's right. You'll pay for what you did to Sensei and the leaf. Tsunade glared at the two traitors as she released copious amounts of killing intent. Orochimaru simply looked at Kabuto, who nodded and bit his thumb. He pulled up Orochimaru's bandage in his right arm, revealing a snake tattoo, and smeared the blood over it. The two loyal Sanin knew what was about to happen and also bit their thumbs as they went through hand seals rapidly. There were 3 simultaneous shouts. Summoning jutsu. Tsunade and Orochimaru summoned 2 giant animals. Orochimaru and Kabuto stood atop a purple snake. Tsunade stood atop of a massive white slug with blue markings running along its side. And Jiraiya. Yo. The small rust-red toad waved at Naruto from his spot next to Jiraiya. Naruto couldn't believe his eyes. His sensei had summoned Gamakichi. You've got to be kidding me. Jiraiya screamed. Hello Lady Tsunade, it's good to see you. The slug said to her summoner. It's good to see you too, Katsuyu. Orochimaru. I want at least 100 sacrifices for summoning me. Naruto saw the giant snake yell at his summoner in anger. I can't believe I summoned Yukichi. Jiraiya groaned as Naruto walked up to Jiraiya as he bit his own thumb. I knew you were old sensei, but having performance problems already. Shizune blushed at the blonde's words as Jiraiya just gaped at him. Meanwhile, Gamakichi was laughing his head off. Naruto gathered chakra before slamming his hands on the ground. Summoning jutsu. There was a giant plum smoke which quickly dissipated to show Gamabunta. Pops. Gamakichi waved hello at his father from his nose. Kichi. What are you doing here? Manda. Katsuyu. Jiraiya. Naruto jumped down onto Bunta's nose and picked Gamakichi up. Chief. I summoned you. Jiraiya had his chakra control messed up and was only able to summon Gamakichi here, so I brought you out so you could support him against Orochimaru and his summon. The chief toad looked at the blonde who had placed his son on his head. Very well. Since it's you and you summoned me for something important, I'll help. Looks like the missus is getting a new snakeskin wallet today. Naruto jumped down to stand next to Shizune as the old teammates stared each other down. It's been almost 15 years since we've all been together like this. Orochimaru spoke. And this will be the last time too. You're not leaving here alive. Jiraiya threatened. Come now. Jiraiya, we've had this song and dance before, besides. If Sensei couldn't beat me, what makes you think you can? Manda, who was watching the exchange, had to slither away to dodge a giant blob of acid from Katsuyu. Always the impatient one, Tsunade. Orochimaru taunted. Stop wasting time. Jiraiya, let's go. Right. Katsuyu spat more acid as Manda weaved around them, going for the perpetrator only to stop short when Gamabunta tried to jump down on him, blade drawn. The exchange continued for a while. Gamabunta using his jumping ability to avoid strikes from Manda and at the same time using his mobility to cover Katsuyu when Manda got too close to her. Katsuyu herself was acting as long-range support for Gamabunta, and Manda used his superior speed to dodge all attacks. Eventually, Manda was able to use his superior speed to wrap around Katsuyu, who split apart into countless smaller versions of herself. Tsunade took the opportunity to punch Manda away. Bunta. Oil. Gamabunta nodded at his summoner, seeing an opening to end this fight, and put his blade down to go through hand seals. Fire style. Fire bullet. Ninja arts. Toad oil bullet. The two techniques combined with a towering inferno, and the body of Manda could be seen in the flame withering in pain. Naruto watched on as he and Shizune had been forced to jump away to a safer distance because of the scale of the attacks. Gamabunta and Jiraiya got closer to the burned body of Manda once the flames ceased. Naruto saw that parts of the skin were collapsing in on themselves as his eyes widened in realization, but before he could warn his sensei and Gamabunta, Manda blasted out of the ground, fangs poised to strike at Gamabunta. Not so fast. Tsunade shouted as she grabbed Bunta's blade that he had set down to do his jutsu and used it to skewer it through Manda's mouth, immobilizing him. Orochimaru yelled in rage as he wrapped his tongue around the medic's throat and swung her around before slamming her into the ground. He tried to reel his tongue back but couldn't. Tsunade had a vice grip on his tongue as she gave a mighty pull. Get over here. Orochimaru flew to Tsunade, who unleashed a crippling blow to the snake Sanin's face. Naruto heard his skull crack as he was launched away and rolled lifelessly on the ground. Kabuto, who was still on Manda, quickly made his way to his master's side. Damn you, Orochimaru. If you ever summon me again, I'll kill you. Manda roared as he left, leaving behind Gamabunta's sword. Naruto watched the corpse of the Sannin closely, his instincts telling him he wasn't dead yet. It's over. Shizune whispered to herself as she made her way to her master. You owe me some sake, Jiraiya. Gamabunta yelled at Toad Sage. What? But I didn't even summon you. You're right, you summoned my son to the middle of a battle. You owe me 5 barrels of sake, you idiot. After informing his summoner what he owed him, Gamabunta puffed away, shortly followed by Gamakichi. Katsuyu, seeing all other summons leave, bid a short goodbye to Tsunade and left as well. Everyone was on alert as Orochimaru's body moved. His jaw dislocated and opened to an inhuman degree as a perfectly unharmed Sannin slithered out. Brutal as always, Tsunade. You haven't changed at all, have you? Naruto rushed forward to take out Orochimaru as he was still getting out of his old body but was stopped by Jiraiya. Don't go crazy. He'd wipe the floor with you. Naruto nodded grudgingly as Kabuto came to stand next to Orochimaru as he fully extended to his full height. It's a shame you had to oppose me, Tsunade. You would have lived a longer life. Orochimaru sighed as parts of his face started to peel away. Regardless, I have other ways to heal myself. It was the face of a woman who stared back at the group as Naruto felt a shiver run up his spine. What have you done? Jiraiya gasped. Orochimaru didn't answer, only smiled at his old teammates. It's been a fun reunion, but I must be off. Orochimaru and Kabuto sank into the ground and all that was left was the decomposing body Orochimaru had shed. There was silence for the group that was interrupted by Naruto huffing angrily. That's 2 scars he's given me. Naruto looked down to his new wound, which crossed over his old scar, making an X pattern on his chest. The others relaxed as the situation became less tense. You're lucky you've walked away from both encounters alive, brat. Jiraiya said as he ruffled his student's hair. Let's go back to the hotel. I can treat your wound better there and give Jiraiya the antidote for the poison. The group made it to the hotel as everyone patched up any wounds they might have, and Tsunade tried to get rid of the younger blonde's new scar. I've managed to heal you as best I can. Unfortunately, the poison on Kusanagi didn't allow me to close it before it scarred over. It's fine. It's not like the scar will change anything. Naruto replied. The blonde turned his head to his sensei, who was giggling mightily. Oh, but it will. Don't you know chicks dig battle scars? I know you spent the night with the young Yamanaka heiress before we left for the mission. I'll bet she'll love the new scar. Jiraiya continued to giggle as he brought out his journal. I can see it now. Make out tactics. Golden romance. Naruto flushed slightly before yelling at Jiraiya. First of all, how do you know about that? Second, me and Ino aren't like that, ya perv. Tsunade, seeing her young charge being harassed, walked over to the giggling pervert and sent him through the wall. Enough of your antics, Jiraiya. Naruto's love life isn't any of your concern. I don't have a love life. The whiskered blonde shouted as Shizune giggled to herself as she watched on. The group eventually calmed down and they all left for the leaf at noon. Jiraiya led the group. He was nursing several bumps on his head, followed by Shizune and her pig Taunton. The 2 blondes were in the back as Tsunade wanted to speak to Naruto. I want to thank you. Naruto walked at a leisure pace as he glanced at the older woman. For reminding me about my will of fire. I lost myself in my grieving and not one of my loved ones would have wanted that. My brother and fiancé both wanted to be Hokage, and both sensei and grandfather wanted to protect the village so others could live peacefully. So, I figured the best way to honor them would be to follow in their lead. I'll be Hokage for now. At least until you're old enough to take the hat. Tsunade smiled at the young blonde as he nodded tearfully at another person believing in his dream. After 2 days of travel, the group made it to the gates of the Leaf Village as he heard Tsunade whisper to herself. I'm home. Naruto sat in his living room contemplating the last couple of hours. He had spent the last hour debriefing the council with Jiraiya on the mission to retrieve Tsunade. Things were going well until he disclosed his encounter with Itachi along with the traitorous snake Sannin. Their involvement had automatically raised the rank of the mission to S class. This made talking about the details of the mission to anyone who was not a Jonin a crime. Naruto was seriously annoyed when some of the stricter members emphasized being punished. The whiskered blonde had to hold back an eye roll. It wasn't like the blonde wasn't a walking S-class secret himself. Jiraiya had seen the blonde's irritation beginning to rise and sent the blonde home as soon as his part of the debriefing was over. He told him he would pass by to talk to him when he was done, but it would take at least another hour, more if the council was feeling chatty. Naruto had also learned from Shizune, who he had run into on his way out, that Tsunade had gone to the hospital already and healed his wounded teammate and his team sensei. Naruto was interrupted from his thoughts when he heard a knock on the door before Jiraiya let himself in, not waiting for Naruto to come to answer the door. Yano, you're supposed to wait for someone to let you in, right? Naruto deadpanned as Jiraiya let out a laugh. That only applies to other ninjas. Jiraiya the gallant may enter anywhere he wishes. Jiraiya struck a pose as Naruto rubbed the bridge of his nose as he lamented the fact that all his senseis were so weird. They even got progressively weirder the stronger they got. God, I hope I don't become a weirdo if I become an S-class ninja. Jiraiya composed himself as his features shifted to a more serious demeanor. Okay kid, serious talk time. Naruto sat up straighter, his full focus on the white-haired toad sage. I was going to tell you the moment you became a chunin, but with how hectic things are I put it off. Jiraiya reached into his vest and pulled out a picture of a red-haired kunoichi. This is Kushina. She was the container of the 9 tails before you. Demon containers are also called Jinchuriki, so don't be surprised if you ever hear the term used to describe you if you face higher-ranked ninja. All Jinchuriki act as war deterrents for their respective villages during times of peace and are often sent to the front lines as a vanguard for any scrimmages between nations, as a reminder to others of the power they fight against. Naruto took a second to absorb the information as he stared at the woman who was his predecessor. It was a lot to take in. He knew having the 9 tails sealed inside him made him more valuable to the village, but it was another thing entirely to know he was a war deterrent. After a second he finally responded. Makes sense. I wouldn't want to fight me. Facing Gaara was hard enough and he didn't even get to use his tenant's chakra. Jiraiya took a deep breath. There's something else you need to know about her. Naruto looked up from the picture to look at Jiraiya. Her full name was Kushina Uzumaki. Naruto felt his heart skip. She was also your mother. There was an eerie silence as Naruto looked back at the picture, 1001 emotions racing through his eyes as he took in every single detail from the picture. He could hear his heart beating at an astounding pace. She's pretty. Naruto's voice cracked as a single tear ran down his eye. Jiraiya allowed the blonde a moment to take everything in before he continued his explanation. She was a real firecracker and a hell of a kunoichi. She and your father made big names of themselves during the Third War. Things would have turned out very differently for the Leaf without them. She used to drive your old man crazy with her gung-ho attitude. Naruto nodded as he wiped his eyes with his sleeve. You know who my father is. There was no question in his tone and Jiraiya let out an inaudible sigh. Yes, it's the main secret of why we kept your heritage a secret. Jiraiya reached into his vest once more as he pulled out another picture. The council argued over letting you know about him, but lately your actions have made them think you're mature enough to handle the information. The toad sage showed the picture to the whiskered blonde. It was a picture of 2 people. His mother was standing to the right, clearly pregnant. She had a radiant smile on her face. She was wearing a blue shirt and shorts with what appeared to be a green apron. Naruto inhaled sharply as he saw the man next to her. It was a face he saw almost daily and one when growing up the blonde had idolized. Standing next to his mother with equal happiness showing on his face as he touched her stomach was the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze. When I first found out about the 9 tails I always wondered why he chose me of all people. Naruto let out a small laugh. The 3rd always said it was because he believed in me. I asked myself why he would trust me with something as massive as this, but it does make sense now. He trusted me because he was my father. Naruto held the picture of his parents tightly as he compared their features to himself. You can keep the pictures, just try to keep them to yourself. Especially now, because of Orochimaru's attack, we've been having some trouble with the Stone Village. They've been sending out teams closer to our border, and it has the Waterfall Village on high alert. Seeing as they're our closest ally at the moment, it wouldn't surprise me if you were sent out in the coming weeks for a joint patrol mission with a team of Waterfall Ninja to patrol their border. The Stone Village's hatred for your dad is tremendous. The amount of damage he did to their ranks was a major reason we won the war. This was one of the factors that were taken into account as to why your heritage was kept secret. It wouldn't be the first time someone has targeted the children of a cage to strike at them. Even a dead one. Naruto nodded as Jiraiya patted his head. How are you feeling? I know it's a lot to take in. I'm angry at the bastard for sticking the 9 tails in me, but I also understand he had no choice at the time. Jiraiya sat there as the blonde vented his emotions. I know, but he loved you and your mom so much. When he found out he was going to be a father, he was like a little kid being told their birthday had come early and brought all the other holidays with it. He ran around the village to all his friends to tell them and wouldn't shut up about it. Jiraiya had a small smile as Naruto laughed softly. I'm just glad I finally know. Naruto kept staring at his parents. The white-haired Sannin got up from his chair as he made his way to the door. I need to get going, but if you need to talk, just tell me. Naruto got up and hugged Jiraiya. The two stood there for a minute. I'll be fine, thank you. Jiraiya nodded as he left. Naruto made his way over to his bed as he calmed himself down and began to meditate. After a while, he felt himself being pulled into the seal. What do you want? Naruto saw that the 9 tails was lazily swaying his tails. He had his left eye slightly open as he stared down at the blonde. I just wanted to thank you for telling me about my mother. The fox huffed and sent small waves across the water in the seal. I also wanted to thank you for calming me down during the fight with Orochimaru. The fox closed his eye and turned away from the small human. Just make sure not to lose yourself again. I can't have my container running around like some temperamental child. The fox curled into himself as Naruto just nodded. He had seen this reaction from the fox many times. There were days where the fox was talkative and days like today where he became a brick wall to talk to. Thank you anyway. I'll come to talk to you some other time, alright? See you later. Naruto felt the tug in his navel and was back in his room. He saw it was already late and decided to call it a night. He was drained both mentally from the council meeting and emotionally from the bombshell of finding out who his parents were. Naruto fell asleep with dreams of what it would have been like if the 9 tails never attacked. The next morning, Naruto woke up early and he headed to the memorial stone. He wanted to pay his respect to his parents, and now that he finally knew their names, he could finally do it. The blonde looked at all the names carved in the stone and found his parents' names next to each other. Naruto traced the names with his fingers as he sent a quick prayer up. It was a very bittersweet moment. All during his childhood there was a cloud hanging over the blonde. Questions that would plague his inner psyche and would attack his self-confidence during his lowest moments. He always wondered if his parents had abandoned him, that they were just like the majority of the villagers and just didn't give a damn about him. Knowing that they loved him, died for him, it cleared any and all doubts he had. The blonde was interrupted from his reflections when an Anbu appeared behind him, appearing in the standard leaf body flicker. Chunin Uzumaki, you have been summoned to the Hokage's office. Naruto nodded as the masked ninja body flickered away. Well, no use in wasting time. Naruto sent one last look at the memorial stone, his gaze solely on his parents, before he also body flickered away. Inside the Hokage's office sat Tsunade with her cage hat hanging on her head. Shizune stood beside her mentor with a stack of papers, and Jiraiya stood near the window as he stared at the village below. Hello, Lady Hokage. Shizune, Jiraiya-sensei. The blonde received a smile from the raven-haired medic and a wave from the toad sage. Tsunade gave him a quick nod as she looked the blonde over. I was talking with Jiraiya and the council last night about what Kabuto mentioned happening during the Chunin exam. I need to know what happened between you and your team. Naruto's lips pursed. He really just wanted to forget the whole thing before he nodded and began to explain. I was separated from the rest of my team in the Forest of Death when I was hit by a massive wind jutsu. I was flung back and was attacked by what I know now was a snake summon, and it managed to eat me whole. Naruto made a face of disgust as he continued. I managed to free myself by creating hundreds of clones and bursting the snake from the inside. I traveled my way back to find both Sasuke and Sakura paralyzed from Orochimaru's killing intent and about to be attacked by another of the snake's summons. At this point, I used some of the Nine Tails chakra to deal with the snake before trying to fight Orochimaru. Naruto paused at the looks the others were giving him. He developed a tick mark at Jiraiya's "you're an idiot" face. I didn't know it was him at the time. The others merely nodded, more understanding now. Anyway, I wasn't able to even breath on him as he smacked me around for about 2 minutes before he cut my connection with the Nine Tails and I was knocked out of the fight. Naruto's face scrunched up. He brought out his damned sword from his mouth and proceeded to play around with Sasuke for a bit when he slashed down with his sword and caught Sasuke by surprise. Naruto's tone grew slightly angry. Then Sasuke had the marvelous idea to use me for a substitution. I landed on the floor barely conscious and watched Orochimaru bite Sasuke on his neck, telling him he would come seek him out before leaving. Sakura grabbed Sasuke and left after that. I managed to heal up because the Nine Tails managed to filter some of his chakra through, and eventually I met back up with both my team and Team 10. After that, we left the forest but had to fight a sound team and Kabuto joined up with us. No doubt keeping an eye on Sasuke for whatever reason Orochimaru wanted. Tsunade had a grim look on her face. That is troubling. I knew the Uchiha had problems, but this is another level of what we were expecting. Under normal circumstances we would have punished him for using a teammate for a substitution. Unfortunately, we can't do anything because of the rules of the Chunin exams. Still, his mental stability is concerning. Along with his recent encounter with his brother, he will be put on watch. Naruto nodded, understanding the situation. There was another reason I brought you here. You have a mission. The blonde didn't say anything as he simply nodded, expecting this from what Jiraiya had told him yesterday. As you know, the upper-level ninja have been doing their best rooting out any sound village bases in the country along with dealing with the sand and trying to work out a new treaty with them. This has caused the Chunin to pick up the slack. Normally a newly promoted Chunin would be put out on missions with their original Genin team or with more experienced group of Chunin, but your team is currently out of commission and all of the more experienced Chunin are doing high-level missions. So, what is the mission? Naruto asked. Jiraiya told me he talked to you last night about your parents. The whiskered blonde let out a low hum to confirm to Tsunade that he had. Good. Did he tell you about the situation with Waterfall and Stone? Yes. He mentioned it. Then I won't be too long. There has been an increase in activity with Stone Ninja patrolling around the border with Waterfall. We need information, and one of Stone's most prominent traders, Ryuga Takahashi, will be staying in the border town of Kuwabara near the Land of Grass. There is an annual weapons exposition that is happening 2 weeks from now in the Land of Rivers, and he will be there till then. You along with Hana Inuzuka, Ino Yamanaka, and 1010 will go and extract any information you can about his deals with the Stone Village. What I would give to be given a mission with a team full of women. Jiraiya let out a giggle as blood ran down his nose, but was stopped by the combined killing intent of the two blondes in the room. Both unintentionally mirroring the other's thought. You perv. Moving on. Hana will be leading this mission. She will be able to find your target fairly quickly. Ino will go as she can enter the mind of the target to extract the information while he sleeps. 1010 will be your cover so no one gets too suspicious when you get to Kuwabara town. She will act as a merchant's daughter to not make any of the foreign traders too nervous. You will go as a backup in case things go south and a fight erupts. Naruto nodded along. When will we be leaving? You and your team will be leaving in 2 days' time. The mission should only last about a week at most. Got it. Is there anything else? Tsunade nodded before her eyes softened. How's your scar? It's fine. Naruto rubbed his chest and his green necklace fell out because of the movement. Honestly, I haven't even thought about it. Tsunade nodded and she dismissed the blonde. Naruto. The blonde turned back to his Hokage. Yes. Tsunade smiled at him. Be careful on your mission. Naruto grinned back. I will. Naruto made his way out with Jiraiya walking with him. Come on kid, we're going to training ground 34. Okay. Let's go. Naruto and Jiraiya ran across the rooftops. The blonde looked around and saw that most of the repairs to the village had been done with only some minor cleaning needed. The villagers kept themselves busy with errands as children played in the streets. The two-toed summoners stopped in the clearing that was training ground 34 after 5 minutes of travel. The clearing was a simple patch of grass with dense forest all around. We need to talk about something serious, kid. How many more life-altering secrets are there? Jiraiya quickly shook his head. No, nothing like that. I need to talk to you about the organization Itachi and Kisame belong to. You mentioned them the other day, the Akatsuki. That's right. They're a group of S-rank ninja who are targeting you and the other Jinchuriki. I'll be training you into the dirt whenever I have the time. I just got some intel today telling me the Akatsuki won't be mobilizing for another 3 years, so we have time to prepare. When you get back from your mission, we'll be upping your taijutsu training. So, there's a group of S-class criminals after me. Yes. The two stood there looking at each other in complete silence. Okay, is there anything else? Jiraiya shook his head. No, why don't you go rest for your mission? Take these days off. You deserve the rest. Right, I'll see you around then. Jiraiya ruffled Naruto's hair as he left. The blonde stood there for minutes, allowing the information to sink in before he started walking to the memorial stone. Naruto thought about how fast and powerful Itachi, Kisame, and Orochimaru were and the level he would have to reach to stand a chance. Naruto came to the clearing of the memorial stone and saw Kakashi standing there looking at the stone. Naruto saw his team sensei look from the stone to him with an eye smile. Hello Naruto, congratulations on your promotion. Naruto didn't say anything as he walked next to Kakashi and looked at his parents' name. They stood side by side in awkward silence for a couple of minutes before the younger man replied. Thanks. Naruto's tone didn't betray any emotion. The masked ninja let out a small sigh as he stared at his student. Listen Naruto, I never meant to ignore you and Sakura the way I did. I honestly thought Sasuke had the best chance to be promoted. I was going to turn my attention to you and Sakura after he was promoted. Naruto kept staring at the stone, not making any indication that he had heard Kakashi, though on the inside we felt his anger starting to rise. What if he wasn't promoted? Kakashi blinked twice before looking at his student. Excuse me. Naruto let out a sigh as he turned his steely gaze to Kakashi. What if he wasn't promoted? What if he went and won the tournament and wasn't promoted? Would you have continued to only train Sasuke if none of us got promoted? No, I would have trained all of you in that scenario. Naruto scoffed. Are you sure you would be able to do that? After all, we've been a team for 6 months, and aside from some basic teamwork drills, the only time you've ever taught us something worthwhile was during the mission to Wave. Kakashi shook his head. You guys needed the teamwork drills. You weren't ready for more advanced teachings. Naruto glared at the older man, his eyes turning purple as the fox's chakra reacted to his rage before he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. And Sasuke was. Because out of the 3 of us, he was the one who needed to learn to be a good teammate the most. Instead, you spent the month leading up to the Chunin exams giving him one-on-one training and leaving me and Sakura to practice our tree climbing. Naruto turned away from his sensei and went back to staring at the memorial stone, his eyes turning back to normal as his temper was back under control. I made mistakes leading this team and I am sorry. Kakashi's voice was solemn. Do you know what the worst part is, Kakashi? The silver-haired ninja let out an internal wince at the lack of sensei. It was that you didn't believe in me enough to even try and train me for the finals. Kakashi let out a visible wince at that. You keep telling me we were supposed to be a team, but for the last 2 months you've shown me and Sakura that Sasuke was your student and we were just 2 tag-alongs. Kakashi looked at his student with hurt evident in his one visible eye, his shoulders slumped. I never meant to push you and Sakura away, Naruto. The Chunin just sighed as he turned away from the stone after giving a small prayer and started heading to the village. Maybe not, but you did. I'll see you later, Kakashi. With that, the blonde body flickered back to his apartment. Naruto went inside and was suddenly overcome by exhaustion as he headed to his room to take a much-needed nap. Naruto woke up several hours later when his stomach rumbled. He got up groggily and decided to eat out as he didn't have any food in his home. Looks like it's Ichiraku time. The blonde thought as he made his way to his favorite ramen stand. As Naruto got inside, he saw a familiar face in one of the chairs. Hey, Naruto. Congrats on the promotion. I can't believe you're the same rank as I am now. Naruto let out a smile as he sat next to his academy instructor. It's nice to see you, Iruka-sensei. The two sat and began to catch up while they ate. Naruto spent a good hour telling his old sensei about his mission to find Tsunade and his second encounter with Orochimaru. The two soon left with Iruka paying for the meal as a gift for the blonde's promotion. Naruto spent the rest of the day and the next going over his book on Fuinjutsu. It was 8 in the morning when Naruto started to head off to the western gate to meet with his squad. His thoughts kept cycling back to what Jiraiya had told him about the Akatsuki. Naruto saw that he was the last to arrive as his 3 teammates had already gathered and with that made haste to join them, putting all thoughts about the dangerous organization in the backburner of his mind. Naruto walked up to his waiting team. Hana and her 3 ninja dogs noticed him first and sent him a polite nod and smile. This action caused Ino and Tenten, who was talking to the older Kunoichi, to turn around and look at the approaching blonde. Both of their eyes widened when they saw the Chunin vest the whiskered blonde was wearing. Naruto, I had heard you got promoted, congrats. Naruto smiled at Ino as he walked to stand with the group. I knew you were going to get promoted after the matches you had in the finals and the way you acted during the invasion. Naruto turned to look at Neji and Lee's teammate as he gave her a small nod. Thanks, how's Lee doing with his recovery? Tenten let out a sad sigh. He's not doing too great. Lady Tsunade will be performing a risky operation today, but it's the only chance he has of being a ninja again. Naruto placed his hand on the Kunoichi's shoulder in a show of camaraderie. He'll make it through. He's the hardest worker I know and a fierce fighter. He won't let something like this slow him down. Yeah, Lee is super strong. He'll pull through, Ino said as the 3 young members stood silent for a moment before they were brought to attention by Hana. Alright, is everyone ready to head out? Hana received 3 yes, and pulled out a picture from her kunai pouch. The photo showed a middle-aged man who was slightly overweight. He had black hair cut short and had brown eyes. He was wearing a blue and red suit and had a scar on his cheek. This is Ryuga Takahashi. He's a weapons manufacturer that works mostly with the Stone Village and the Grass Village. We will be extracting information from him while he stays in one of our border towns, Kuwabara. Hana's gaze focused on the female blonde. Ino. The platinum blonde stood at attention. You'll be the key to this. When we find him, we will wait for a moment where he will be alone, and then you'll use your clan's jutsu to get any and all information you can on his recent business with the Stone Village. We'll be traveling by tree, so it should take us about 2 days to reach the town. If our info is right, he'll be staying in Kuwabara town for the next 5 days, and after we get there we can find an appropriate time to get to him. Do you have any questions? The 3 younger ninjas didn't say anything and nodded in understanding. Good. Then let's get going. With that, the 4 sped off. That night Naruto sat by the fire watching his surroundings. They had drawn lots to determine turn order of who would be taking watch that night. Hana had drawn first, with Tenten getting second and Ino third. They would each stay on watch for 2 hours, letting everyone get 6 hours of sleep. Naruto stared at the stars as he thought about all the new information he had received the last couple of days. He thought of his dream to be Hokage, which led into thoughts of the 3rd, and eventually his train of thought reached the 4th, his father. Naruto felt weird thinking about him as such. For his whole life he had heard stories about how great a ninja the 4th was, and he was more of a figure, an ideal to strive for than a person to the blonde. Naruto reached into his kunai pouch and brought out the picture of his mother. He had started a habit of carrying it around everywhere he went. He had never had a female role model in his life, and finding out about his mother had filled a hole in his heart he always craved. He would see the relationship other children had with their mothers, and it was such an alien concept for him to grasp. Now that changed ever so slightly. There was something that calmed him whenever he would look at her photo, and Naruto lost himself in thinking about the what-ifs. She's pretty. Who is that? Naruto was so lost in thought he jumped slightly as he heard Ino's voice speak from behind him. His eyes followed Ino as she sat beside him, her own gaze never leaving the picture. That's my mom. Ino's drowsy eyes widened and became more alert. Naruto's eyes went back to staring at the picture, a small smile forming on his face. I thought you didn't know who she was. Naruto remembered how some of the older kids in the academy used to bully him for not knowing who his parents were, and his grip on the photo tightened slightly. I found out a couple of days ago. She used to be a Jonin. She died during the Nine Tails attack. Ino nodded and the two sat silently watching the fire. You have her facial structure and nose. Yeah, I kinda wish I had her hair color though. I think I would look good in red. Blonde works for you. Naruto turned to Ino, who flipped her hair. Besides, blonde is the best. Naruto let out a grin as the two started making breakfast for their teammates who were in the process of waking up. The group exchanged pleasantries, and once they ate breakfast they started their journey again. The 2 days of travel passed quickly and the group reached the edge of Kuwabara town without any difficulty. Hana stopped near the entrance of the town and addressed her teammates. Alright team, we'll split up here and search for Ryuga. If you find him, radio in using these earpieces. Hana handed each of the teens a small earpiece. From then we'll shadow him for the rest of the day and try to get as much information as possible about his routine. Ino, Naruto, you guys will take the west side of town and 10-10 and I will look in the east. The three nodded as Naruto and Ino separated from the group. We'll meet up at sundown at the town center. The two blondes nodded and entered the town as the two kunoichis ran to the other side of the town to start their own search. Naruto created 10 clones and had them use the transformation jutsu to disguise themselves as they went into town to search. As Naruto and Ino traveled into town, they noticed the streets were bustling with vendors as people ran around. It's pretty busy, it'll be a challenge to find him. Ino said. Let's check the weapons shops. For now, we can start searching diners and bars closer to lunchtime. Ino nodded as the two headed off. They spent several hours checking multiple locations and found nothing. Naruto had received memories of his clones who also came up empty-handed. The two blondes entered a local restaurant when they heard their radio earpieces come on. Naruto, Ino, we found Ryuga. We're about to try to gain more information about his schedule right now. Make your way over to us. Naruto hit his earpiece as he replied. Copy. Well, make our way over to you now. Got it. We are currently at the Jade Inn Casino. We will wait for you on top of the roof of the building across the street from the casino when we're done. See you soon. The two blondes met up with Hana and 10-10 after 20 minutes, where the older Chunin began explaining what they had learned. Ryuga will be leaving tonight with a small group of mercenaries. We'll follow tonight and get him when we see an opening. We need to get to him before he leaves Fire Country for security reasons. How many mercenaries are there? Naruto asked Hana. There was a group of 3 following him, but we gathered they would be meeting with another group of 3 outside. The 4 spent the day taking turns watching Ryuga and his group while other members gathered food and other materials. The sun was sitting low in the sky when Ryuga's group left town, Naruto and his squad following behind them in the trees. It was an hour later when they noticed the group was slowing down. Naruto looked around the whole situation, feeling off to him. Be on guard. The Heimaru brothers picked up a scent up ahead. They'll be meeting the others soon. Hana received 3 nods as the group stood high above in the trees, waiting for the rest of the mercenaries to arrive. Hana ordered the group to the ground and the group hid among the shrubbery. Naruto looked around as he felt tense. Something was putting him on edge. Up ahead they could see a single figure walking up when they heard Ryuga shout out. Finally. I've been waiting for you, Kazuma. Naruto heard Hana curse as the figure became visible to everyone. He was stood around 6 feet and was wearing pure black pants with white wrappings on his ankles. He was wearing a dark brown vest but not wearing a shirt, so scars could be clearly seen on his chest. On his forehead, there was a scratched out forehead protector with the symbol of a stone. That's Kazuma Iota, a B rank missing ninja from the Stone Village. Hana's statement made everyone tense up as Naruto started to observe every detail he could. Naruto saw the man smirk as he let out a chuckle. Sorry, I had to do some quick preparation. Kazuma's tone was lively and jovial. I thought there were 3 of them. Thought Naruto as his instincts screamed at him to move. Dodge. The blonde screamed out as the land under the leaf ninjas shifted and formed earth spikes. Naruto managed to push himself and Ino out of the way just in time. Hana, being in the center, was able to push 10-10 out of the way, but a spike managed to pierce her side. Hana let out a scream as she fell to the ground clutching her wound as the Heimaru triplets surrounded their wounded partner. Naruto looked to the side and saw 2 ninjas emerge from the ground. One was wearing gray pants with a dark red shirt. His black hair reached his shoulder blades and a bang covered his left eye. The other wore a skin-tight blue bodysuit and was bald. Both had green eyes and had scratched stone forehead protectors. Well, what do we have here? A little far from home, aren't you? Naruto glanced to the main road where Kazuma stood in front of the frightened Ryuga. Leaf ninja. What is the meaning of this? Ryuga gained more confidence as he spoke once he was firmly behind Kazuma. Negima spotted them following you and we decided to take care of them. Ryuga looked at Kazuma with gratitude as he and the rest of his mercenary group began moving away and the rogue stone ninja jumped up to a tree branch. Right. Take care of this quickly then, I'll throw in a nice bonus when you're done. Kazuma smirked as he looked at the leaf ninja. Naruto glanced at his teammates and quickly formulated a plan. Ino, 10-10 take Hana to safety and go after the target, we can't have him leaving without getting the information. The two nodded and quickly moved over to Hana who shot the blonde a concerned look as she began treating her wound. Kazuma let out a laugh as he jumped down to the forest floor as he eyed the downed Hana. What makes you think I'll let any of you go? You're all so pretty, I'm sure I can get some value out of you. The two younger girls shivered as Hana glared at the stone ninja. Kazuma had to quickly bring his arm up to block a strike as Naruto surged forward and delivered a punch. Kazuma's eyes widened as he was blasted back and hit a tree. Coating your arm in earth chakra to increase its weight and hardness, smart. Negima. Sakazu. The two other rogue ninjas dashed at the whiskered blonde who crossed his fingers and uttered his most used jutsu. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. Naruto created 20 clones as they spread out. Two of the blondes rushed the charging stone ninjas but were dispelled immediately, making a smoke cloud that blocked their view. Naruto was going through hand seals with his clones when the ground shifted beneath him. Earth style. Earth flow jutsu. Naruto managed to jump away just in time to void Kazuma's jutsu. He watched his clones get dispelled when they were swallowed by the shifting earth as trees toppled over. I got you now. Naruto brought up his arms in a cross shape as he blocked a punch from the bald rock ninja that sent him rocketing to the ground where he was met with a kick to the face from the long-haired one. Shit. They cover each other well. Naruto glanced back and saw that Ino and 10-10 had taken Hana away. Good. I can cut loose now that I don't have to worry about them. Naruto was brought out from his musings when he brought out a kunai to block a sword swing from Kazuma. The blonde's arms and legs buckled from the strength of the blow. That thing must weigh a ton. Naruto was forced to jump back when the two companions of Kazuma performed a pincer maneuver and tried to stab him from his sides with kunai. The bald ninja came forward and tried to punch Naruto, who spun around the blow and kicked the older man away. Naruto created two clones to distract Kazuma while he sped off to deal with the long-haired one. The rock ninja tried a lunging stab, so Naruto used his kunai to parry the blow away from himself. The blonde was about to thrust his own kunai into the rock ninja's neck when his instincts screamed at him to duck. Naruto felt the wind slice above his head as some of his hairs fell in front of his face. He quickly spun and had to block Kazuma's sword once more. This time he was sent skidding back as his kunai chipped and cracked from the force of the blow. You're more skilled than you look. Most Chunin and even some Jonin would have fallen by now. Naruto glanced at his kunai as he threw it away and brought out another. The bald ninja had managed to regroup with his companions. Negima. Attack pattern alpha. Naruto saw the long-haired man yell to his partner as the two rushed Naruto. The bald man Negima tried to do a sweeping low kick. Naruto stepped back to avoid the attack. His partner Sakazu leapt off his back to deliver a dropkick. Naruto dodged to the left and was forced to once again block a sword swing from Kazuma. His eyes widened when he observed the blade more closely. His blade is black. Naruto had to reinforce his body with chakra so he wasn't sent skidding back again. Naruto saw from the corner of his eye that Negima and Sakazu were going through hand seals. Pain exploded from the blonde's chest as he was sent flying from a kick from Kazuma, who taunted the blonde. You're not the only one who knows how to augment his hits with Earth Chakra, kid. Naruto landed on his back and was able to flip himself back onto his feet. Earth style. Rock spears. Dual shouts rang out as dozens of spears hurled at the whiskered blonde who let out a curse. Naruto blazed through his own hand seals as he slammed his hands onto the ground. Earth style. Mud wall. His mud wall came up just in time to block the spears which shattered on impact. Naruto used the opportunity to create 5 clones and had them dash into the trees and hide themselves. Naruto himself jumped up to a nearby tree just in time to dodge a giant rolling boulder that tore through his mud wall. He clutched his chest as he felt more pain from the wound Kazuma had given him. Damn it, that might have broken a rib. Naruto thought as he heard Kazuma begin to speak. I think that's enough playing around. Negima, Sakazu go deal with the others, I'll handle the blonde. Just before the two left, the group was forced to jump back as a fireball came out of the forest. No, you won't. I'll end this now. Naruto finished his sentence as two more fireballs flew at the stone ninjas, forcing them to separate even further. Naruto saw his clones come up behind Negima as Kazuma and Sakazu were being distracted by hails of kunai and fireballs from his clones hiding in the trees. The two clones sped through hand seals and called out their jutsus. Fire style. Grand Fireball Jutsu. Wind style. Great Breakthrough. The original orange flames of the fireball turned blue as they started burning with more intensity. Being fueled by the wind jutsu, the fire roared as it tuned everything in its path. Negima was unable to move out of the way completely as his legs were severely burned from the flames and he screamed out in pain. Naruto body flickered next to the downed ninja and stabbed his kunai through his skull, ending his life. Negima. Naruto heard Sakazu shout out in rage as he charged the blonde. Sakazu no. Kazuma tried to warn his comrade, but it was too late. A clone came out of the bushes and slammed his electrified hands into Sakazu's chest. Lightning style. Electromagnetic murder. Lighting surged from the clone's hand as Sakazu began to spasm and after a couple of seconds fell to the ground smoking and charred. Naruto saw Kazuma grit his teeth as he slammed his hands on the ground. Earth style. Earth shift. The entire area began to shake as slabs of the earth began to flip upwards, uprooting trees and dispelling all of Naruto's clones. There was now a circle around Kazuma of clear land from the flipped earth. You will pay for killing them, you damned brat. Kazuma body flickered to blonde and swung down with his blackened sword. Naruto channeled chakra to his arms as he blocked the strike. The blonde had to hold a grimace as his chest once again began to hurt. Kazuma began a series of strikes with his sword and the blonde was put on the defensive, just barely keeping up with the older ninja's speed. The two continued to clash as sparks formed every time their blades clashed. Kazuma moved swiftly in a tornado of blows and Naruto was being pushed back to the edge of the clearing, unable to do anything. Because of the reach advantage, Naruto was unable to get in close and he wasn't able to escape as Kazuma was just as fast as the blonde. Kazuma thrust his sword forward trying to impale the blonde who had bumped into a tree. There, thought Naruto as he shifted to his side as the blade grazed his Chunin jacket and impaled the tree. Naruto exploded forward as he started to gather and spin chakra in his right hand. Kazuma's eyes widened and filled with a burning hate when he saw the jutsu the blonde now held in the palm of his hand. Rasengan. The whiskered blonde slammed his jutsu into the older rock ninja's chest as the Rasengan began to grind into him. Kazuma was sent spinning away as the Rasengan exploded in his chest. Naruto watched as Kazuma began coughing up blood as his breathing slowly died out and the blonde collapsed onto the ground. You did look familiar. I just didn't expect you to be the son of that devil. Kazuma's chest stopped moving as his whispered last words echoed in the clearing. Son of a devil, huh? Naruto thought as he gazed at the dead ninja before his head snapped to the far side of the clearing when heard dogs barking. Hana and her ninja dogs came barreling into the new clearing, her side bandaged and marked with her blood from her wound. She looked around and saw the dead bodies of the rogue ninjas and let out a low whistle. Damn, I rushed over here for nothing, looks like you handled everything. Naruto chuckled and winced as his chest reminded him of his injury. I think I broke a rib in the fight. Hana kneeled down next to the blonde as her hands began glowing green and she touched the blonde's chest. Yeah. You have 2 broken ribs and 3 cracked ones. Give me 5 minutes and I should be able to at least mend the broken bones and make the pain lessen a bit. As Hana began to work on the blonde's injury, Naruto questioned her about Ino and Tenten. Did the others get Ryuga? Yes, when I left them Tenten had taken care of his mercenary guards and Ino was in the middle of extracting the information. Hana finished healing the blonde as the 2 Chunin stood up. Let's get going. We don't know if Ryuga hired any more rogue ninjas. Naruto nodded as they left to go find their teammates. The 2 Chunin followed the main road and found the 3 mercenaries tied up as Tenten watched over them. Ino was not too far away with a tied-up Ryuga who seemed to be passed out as she held his head in her hands. Naruto. You're okay. I'm glad Hana was able to find you. Tenten waved the 2 over as the 2 injured members sat near the 2 genins. How long has Ino been interrogating Ryuga? Hana said. She's been at it for at least 10 minutes, we were able to get them easily. Good. Hana turned to the whiskered blonde. Naruto, you did well out there. Thanks. It was tough though, they had amazing teamwork. The trio's attention was brought to Ryuga, who let out a sharp yell as his head dipped further down as Ino released his head. Ino opened her eyes as a grim look overcame her face. The two Chunin glanced at each other with frowns as Hana spoke up. Ino, what did you find? Ino looked over at Hana and Naruto before she took a deep breath. Ryuga has been meeting with many council members of the Stone Village for the last week. They've been negotiating prices for mass manufacturing of supplies. The first shipment will be leaving a factory in River Country for the Stone Village in 3 weeks, with regular shipments coming every 2 weeks. Naruto frowned as he stared at the moon, which shined with an ominous light. They're preparing for war, Naruto thought as the group stayed silent as they digested the information Ino had given them. A heavy silence lingered with the group until Hana finally spoke up, breaking the tension that had formed. We need to get back to the village with this information now. The others nodded when a shrill cry of a hawk was heard and a messenger bird swooped low and landed on Hana's shoulder carrying a message from the village. Hana grabbed the message and read it. Her face cycled through many emotions before it eventually settled into a fierce scowl. Sasuke Uchiha has gone rogue. He was spotted leaving the village by his teammate, and because of how undermanned we are at the moment, the Hokage was forced to send a group of genin to chase after him. She's requesting we send any backup we can to reinforce them, as we are currently the closest team to their location. Naruto closed his eyes as he let out a long breath as Ino and Tenten watched on with looks of shock and anger respectively. Sasuke, you idiot. Naruto opened his eyes and looked towards Hana. Hana, you should take Ino back to the village, and Tenten and I will go back up the retrieval team. Ino shot the blonde a glare. No way, I'm going to. Naruto glared back as Ino flinched slightly. Ino, you have all the information from Ryuga. We can't afford any delays in informing the village, and Hana is already hurt. Me and Tenten going makes the most sense. We're the most combat ready, plus Hana will be able to sniff out any enemies before you encounter them. Ino was about to retort when Hana interrupted her. Ino, Naruto is right, this makes the most sense. Ino huffed but didn't argue any further. Tenten, are you up for going as reinforcement? The weapons specialist nodded. Yes, I'm ready. Hana nodded as she glanced at Naruto. Are you sure you're okay to go? Naruto patted his chest twice and noticed he had a slight discomfort, but it wasn't anything debilitating. Yeah, I'm fine to go. Hana nodded once. Alright, then we'll meet you guys back in the village, we don't have time to waste. The group split off as they headed to their destinations. Naruto jumped through the trees with Tenten as a hard look came to his eyes. Sasuke, I won't let you get away with another betrayal. Naruto and Tenten soared from treetop to treetop at a constant speed. They had been traveling for 5 hours total, with a 30-minute break thrown in the middle. Most of the journey had been made in very tense silence. Tenten had tried to initiate conversation, but Naruto had been too caught up in his thoughts to properly respond. The duo was close to the 6th hour of their journey when they heard a loud boom followed by a slight tremor. The two teens glanced at each other as they made their way to the tree's apex and saw a giant smoke cloud in the relatively close by as a concerned look crossed Tenten's face. That can't be good. I hope they don't have too much trouble capturing Sasuke. Naruto looked at Tenten before he replied. Let's pick up the pace just in case. Right. The two speed off to the direction of the dust cloud, and when they got there they found a corpse of a sound ninja with orange hair styled into a mohawk inside a big crater. Both Tenten and Naruto let out a grimace, knowing that the retrieval team no doubt encountered resistance. Off in the distance they spotted Choji slowly limping to a tree with an arrow pointing east, presumably showing where the rest of the team headed. Naruto and Tenten got on either side of Choji as they helped him lay down. Choji looked startled. His eyes were unfocused as he looked at the two, and his eyes slowly lit up in recognition. Hey guys. Choji's voice was weak and hoarse. Choji, what happened? Naruto said to his kind-hearted comrade. Shikamaru, Neji, Sakura, Keikiba and I were sent out to find Sasuke. Choji let out a bloody cough as Naruto and Tenten tried to help him. He was being kept in some weird circular box, being escorted by 4 sound and ninjas. Naruto saw Choji was losing consciousness. Tell Shika I did it. I beat him. Choji finally lost his battle with unconsciousness as Tenten let out a startled gasp. His heartbeat is slowing down. Naruto let out a curse as he summoned two shadow clones who slowly picked up the injured Choji. I'll have my clones take him back to the village, we need to hurry. Ten nodded as the two took off following the arrow left behind by the retrieval team. As they traveled, Naruto noticed something weird. There's spider webs everywhere. Ten looked back at the blonde Shunin with a raised eyebrow. So, we must be near a nest. The webbing's way too big for normal spiders, the only giant spiders that live in Fire Country are in the Forest of Death. Let's just be careful going forward. The two eventually heard another weak voice speak from up ahead. It's too late, you know. Sasuke is already gone, he belongs to Lord Orochimaru now. The voice laughed as the two-leaf ninja rushed forward and came upon a horrifying sight. Neji was propped up against a tree, a massive wound piercing through his shoulder. Laying face up staring at the sky was another sound ninja. This one had 6 arms and his breathing was barely noticeable. It doesn't matter what you say, I believe my comrades will succeed. Ten brought her hands up to cover her mouth once she saw the condition her teammate was in. Naruto grit his teeth as he saw the 6-armed sound ninja who had been mocking Neji stop breathing. So they sent you as backup. Neji coughed up a tremendous amount of blood as Naruto and Ten tried to stop his bleeding. Neji, don't speak, save your strength. Ten brought out her medical supplies and began to cover Neji's wound as best as she could with Naruto helping with his very limited first aid knowledge. They were able to clog wound and slow the bleeding. I trust you to finish the mission for me, Naruto. Neji's head dipped as he fell into unconsciousness. Ten began to try and lay him down only for Naruto to stop her suddenly. Why did you stop me? Ten yelled at the blonde. We can't move him. Look at his shoulder, if we move him now he'll die of blood loss. Ten looked devastated at being unable to help her teammate. Naruto bit his thumb as he remembered something Jiraiya had told him. Summoning jutsu. Ten looked at Naruto in confusion as a small red toad appeared. Yo, what's up Naruto? From the smoke cloud emerged a small red toad. Kichi, I need you to deliver an urgent message to the Hokage. We need a medical team to come pick up a gravely wounded comrade. Kichi turned around and his eyes widened as he saw Neji. Yikes, alright, I'll be as fast as I can Naruto. Gamakichi gave Naruto a salute. Thanks, Kichi. Gamakichi left and Naruto created 3 clones. One began to press Neji's wound to try and slow the blood loss as much as possible. The other 2 clones jumped into the trees to stand watch so no one could target the downed Neji. We need to keep going Ten. There's nothing more we can do for now. Ten swallowed hard as she wiped a few stray tears from her eyes. Yeah, you're right. Let's go. Naruto saw Ten give a small prayer for Neji before she joined him in the trees and the duo once again followed the trail the rest of the retrieval team left behind. Damn it. This isn't good at all. These guys are no joke if they left Neji half dead. Damn these sound ninja. Naruto felt his anger rise when he and Ten had to cover their eyes as a flashbang went off in the distance. The two looked at each other before heading in the direction of the flashbang when they started hearing a flute playing shortly followed by sounds of trees being hit. They saw a couple of trees topple over as the two came into a clearing. They saw a red-haired kunoichi wearing the same uniform as the other sound ninjas. Naruto and Ten were shocked by her appearance as she had unnatural dark skin tone and horns curving around her head. Naruto saw Shikamaru was surrounded by 3 demonic-looking ogres as he desperately ducked and dodged their blows. One was wearing a dark green full-body suit with its hair covering its face fully, it was also wielding a giant studded metal club. Another was wearing only dark pants and had a blindfold over his bald, scared head. It had spikes tied around his forearm with 2 sticking out in front of its fist and 1 at the elbow. The final one was by far the creepiest as it had maroon pants and had its upper body retrained by bandages with his head looking straight up. Thinking quickly he sped at the red-haired kunoichi as he began to channel earth chakra into his arm turning it black. Naruto managed to punch the red-headed sound kunoichi in the face. Her flute flew from her hands into a nearby bush. The sound kunoichi was sent flying into one of her demons and it sent them tumbling away. Naruto looked back at his comrade and shouted, Ten. Now. Ten took advantage and unleashed a storm of kunai at the 2 remaining demons. They began to backpedal from the rain of weaponry. Shikamaru took the opening to jump away and stand near his comrades. Man, I'm glad you guys are here. This whole mission has become incredibly troublesome. Quote exclamation mark. I'm going to tear you apart. The red-haired woman got up, her three demons falling in line behind her. Where's the rest of your team? Shikamaru looked back at Tenten and took a moment to catch his breath. Kiba got separated from us while battling another sound ninja. Sakura went ahead to chase after another sound ninja came to see why the sound team hadn't arrived yet. Naruto let out a curse knowing whoever Orochimaru would send wouldn't be some weak ninja or even someone at the current level of the sound team. Don't ignore me. The three had to jump back as the ogre with the full body suit attacked, bringing down his massive club down between the trio. Naruto. Said blonde looked at Shikamaru. Go on ahead, me and Tenten will deal with her and then head after Kiba. Sakura is by herself, she needs the most help. They're headed for the border. Tenten brought out a staff and whacked the blindfolded ogre away from Shikamaru. Tenten spun around and gave Naruto a determined nod. Go on, we got this. Naruto nodded back at Tenten before he took off. No, you don't, you shithead. You aren't getting away from me. The red-haired Kunoichi rushed the blonde only to come to a sudden halt. Shadow possession success. Naruto took the opportunity and sped off to find his wayward teammates, trusting his comrades to come out on top in their confrontations. Naruto pumped chakra through his body as he increased his speed to a blistering level. After several minutes, Naruto came to clearing with 3 people, 2 were very familiar and 1 was a complete stranger. Leaf Hurricane. Naruto watched Lee shout as he delivered a flying spin kick to a white-haired teenager who blocked with his forearm. The white-haired teen was wearing a gray lavender zip-up shirt and black pants. He was wearing a large purple rope around his waist that Naruto had seen some of the other sound ninja wear. Sakura was standing away from the conflict as the 2 fighters continued to exchange blows. She looked disheveled and tired. Naruto saw various bones burst from the sound ninja's chest as he stopped a kick from Lee. Lee disengaged quickly. While the white-haired sound ninja was distracted with Lee, Naruto saw an opening to strike. Naruto performed a body flicker as he gathered chakra in his palm to perform his most deadly jutsu. Rasengan. Naruto hit the white-haired ninja in the back, launching him into the tree line where his body left a trail of destruction. Lee and Sakura looked on with surprise at seeing the blonde ninja come out of nowhere to attack their foe. Naruto. Sakura's voice was full of relief at seeing her teammate show up just in time. Greetings, friend Naruto. You. More trash coming to try and interfere with Lord Orochimaru's plan. Whatever Lee was going to say was cut off by the sound ninja coming out of the woods. It matters not in the end, the ritual is almost complete. Naruto then noticed a cylindrical container with many different seals written over it as it began to release smoke. Naruto's instincts flared and he quickly leaned his head to the left as he heard something impact the trees behind him. He saw the sound ninja lower his arm. Lee made his way to stand next to the blonde Chunin, his eyes trained on their enemy. Naruto, our opponent uses his bones as weapons, we must be very careful, he can attack in a multitude of ways. Naruto nodded, his focus switching from the container to the present threat. Are you okay to be out here, Lee? Naruto asked with concern seeping into his voice. Yes. My surgery went off without a hitch. Naruto didn't say anything more as their enemy charged with frightening speed. Naruto saw their opponent reach up to his shoulder where a piece of bone stuck out. With a sickening squelch he pulled out the piece of bone, revealing that it resembled a short sword. Sakura, who was near the tree line, tried to help by throwing a kunai. The sound ninja swiped to the left and easily cut the kunai Sakura had thrown at him in half, not even breaking his stride. Oh, you got to be kidding me, thought Naruto as he watched the bone sword slice through the tempered metal so easily. Lee took the initiative and intercepted the sound ninja with a spin kick that was avoided easily. Lee was about to be stabbed when Naruto struck out with his blackened arm. No, you don't. Naruto forced the sound ninja to block his strike, the force of the blow making the teenager slide back half a foot. Lee jumped over Naruto and brought down an axe kick that was swatted away. Before the blonde could go for another strike, both Naruto and Lee had to jump away when the white-haired teen grew spikes all over his body. The blonde noticed that the sound ninja had weird markings that were spreading slowly, covering over half his body. The white-haired teen let out a bloody cough as he hunched over. Lee and Naruto were about to attack while he was vulnerable but were distracted when the top of the cylinder container was blasted off and a winged figure flew out and landed in the midst of the smoke. There was a tense silence where the four occupants of the clearing watched as the wings retreated into the back of the figure, and soon after the smoke cleared, revealing an obsidian eye. Sasuke Uchiha. The sound ninja spoke to the Uchiha as the smoke fully dissipated, showing his form. Lord Orochimaru has been expecting you. Sakura had tears gathering in her eyes and Lee looked on in silence. Naruto grit his teeth at the appearance of his once teammate. He had flame-like markings covering half his face, with his left eye having an unnatural black sclera and a yellow iris. Sasuke flexed his hands to test their mobility. I feel. Sasuke let out a long shuddering breath. Incredible. His gaze then turned to Naruto and he let out a scowl. Naruto. Sasuke's voice carried across the clearing, breaking the eerie silence that had engulfed it. It seems you got promoted. I didn't realize the village was so desperate they would promote you of all people. Sasuke's tone was condescending and scathing. Sasuke Uchiha. The sound ninja repeated, his voice slightly harder than before. Our Lord Orochimaru has been waiting for you. The sound ninja made his way over to recently released Leaf Ninja, who frowned at the new face. And who are you? Sasuke asked with an uninterested tone. My name is Kimimaro, leader of the Sound Five. Now, you must be headed off. Sasuke looked over at Naruto and locked his eyes with his. Steely blue met black and yellow before the raven-haired teen scoffed and turned around as he leapt away. Naruto quickly took off to follow, but was stopped by a kick to the face that sent him through a tree by the now named Kimimaro. Sasuke, wait. Naruto saw Sakura take off after Sasuke. The blonde was unable to stop his once teammate as Kimimaro began his assault once again. Naruto was able to dodge several sword swipes when Kimimaro used a feint to make Naruto step back. Kimimaro stomped on the blonde's exposed foot and impaled it the next moment with a bone that quickly grew out of his heel. Kimimaro head-butted the blonde, who grit his teeth in pain. As the white-haired teen pulled his sword back to stab him, Naruto punched the older teen in the chest with a blackened arm as hard as he could, sending the older teen stumbling back and freeing his foot. Severe Leaf Hurricane. Lee, who had been watching on the sidelines, hit Kimimaro in the neck when he saw the older teen stumble back. There was a loud snapping sound as Kimimaro was sent flying again, his neck twisted at an acute angle. Naruto felt small amounts of the Nine Tails chakra flow to his foot, slowly healing him as he looked at his green-clad comrade as he used the small respite to catch his breath. Good hit, Lee. Lee let out a solemn nod. I do not like sneak attacks, but I understand when such things are required of me. Naruto was about to respond saying that they needed to go after Sasuke when monstrous amounts of killing intent flared from Kimimaro's body. The two Leaf Ninjas jumped back as the white-haired teen slowly stood up and pushed his neck into the right position. Bone spikes extended from his back. Kimimaro's markings extended to cover his body. Slowly they expanded as his skin turned darker and tail grew from his backside. To think, you would force me to use stage 2 of my curse mark. Kimimaro started to cough violently before he blurred from sight. Naruto's eyes darted around the clearing when he spotted a shadow over himself. The blonde dove as Kimimaro landed as dozens of bone spikes sprouted from the teen, who started spinning as he followed Naruto in an intricate dance of death. This guy is insane. Naruto began to dodge as best he could from the torrent of death that was Kimimaro. He saw Lee standing back with a frustrated expression on his face, unable to get close without being impaled himself. Naruto jumped away from the spinning sound ninja when he saw a bone extend from the white-haired teen's elbow, and Naruto brought up his blackened arm to block. The bone managed to pierce through the blonde's forearm, and Kimimaro spun once again, sending the blonde flying. Naruto flipped and landed on his feet and began to channel an immense amount of chakra. Moments later, the clearing was filled with 100 copies of the blonde. Kimimaro narrowed his eyes as Naruto motioned Lee to jump back. This won't work. Kimimaro reached behind him to his back as he began to pull a long segmented bone. Is that his spine? Lee said in shock as both Leaf Ninjas looked on with mild disgust. Two clones charged but were instantly destroyed when Kimimaro swung his spine sword. More clones rushed and the result was the same as before. Kimimaro danced, spun, and wove around the army of clones, destroying dozens in seconds. Naruto motioned to several of his clones to follow his lead as he began to go through hand seals. Water style. Raging waves. Kimimaro was hit by 3 separate streams of water as 2 clones came from his left and right, going through the same hand seals. Lightning style. Electromagnetic murder. Lightning tore the ground apart as it traveled along the water as the white-haired teen was unable to react in time. After 10 seconds Kimimaro was smoking when he suddenly spun, swinging his spine sword around as he cleaved countless clones and the trees in half. You're annoying. Kimimaro put his hands on the ground. Dance of the seedling fern. All was quiet for a moment before thousands of large bone spikes erupted from the ground. Naruto and Lee jumped away as fast as they could, trying to avoid the deadly technique. Naruto saw Lee falter. Acting quickly, the blonde grabbed the arm of the green-clad genin and threw him away. Because of his actions, a bone spike managed to pierce the blonde's side. Naruto grimaced and raised his blackened arm up just in time for Kimimaro's spine sword to wrap around it. The whiskered blonde saw his opponent emerge from one of the bigger bone spikes with a drill-like bone around his right arm. This is your end. Naruto was then yanked forward by the white-haired monster. Shit. The whiskered blonde quickly used all the chakra he could and formed a Rasengan in his free hand. Kimimaro his arm back before striking with his drill arm, fully intending on piercing through him. The Rasengan smashed into the bone drill as Charka flew from the point of contact as the bone drill tried to destabilize the structure of the Rasengan. Naruto saw his jutsu beginning to deform when Lee came out of nowhere, kicked Kimimaro's right arm away from the blonde. This caused the Rasengan to fully destabilize and the blonde quickly shoved the remains of his jutsu into the sound ninja's face just as it exploded. All three ninja were blasted away. Naruto grabbed his side as it began bleeding profusely. He once again felt the Nine Tails chakra come up and start healing the wound. His arm was also bleeding badly from the explosion. Naruto looked at Lee and saw he was holding his left leg, the same leg he used to kick the bone away. Naruto grimaced as pain exploded from his own leg. He saw he had a bone spike impaling his left leg. The blonde looked over at the sound ninja as he stood back up. His face was a bloody mess with parts of it being missing. Blasted away from the explosion, he started to slowly walk over to the two downed leaf ninja. Kimimaro began to cough violently. Will make. Kimimaro then dashed at Naruto. Lord Orochimaru proud. Naruto. Lee screamed out as the sound ninja dashed at the Chunin. Naruto quickly gathered the rest of his chakra and slammed his hands on the ground. Earth style. Mud wall. The earth wall sprung up as Naruto continued to pump chakra into the wall, trying to reinforce it as much as possible. Naruto saw the bone drill break through his wall and hit his chest. Naruto was pushed back and saw the very tip of the drill had impacted the first Hokage's necklace right over his heart. Naruto looked up and saw blood dripping from Kimimaro's mouth, his chest no longer moving. He stood still and Naruto noticed he had died. The blonde fell onto his back, breathing heavily as he grabbed the necklace with both hands. That's twice now you've saved me. Naruto slowly got up, wincing as his many wounds making things uncomfortable. Naruto. I am glad you're alright. The Chunin made his way to the sitting genin. How's your leg, Lee? Said ninja frowned. I am afraid it is broken. I heard my leg snap when I kicked away his most unyouthful jutsu. Naruto nodded as he reached into his ninja pouch and ate a soldier pill to help with his diminishing reserves. After a moment to allow the pill to take effect, Naruto created two clones and had one of them pick up Lee and the other pick up Kimimaro. I'll have my clone help you get back to the village, Lee. Lee looked like he wanted to argue but understood that he was out of options with his broken leg. Very well, but be careful, my friend. The blonde faced the green lad genin and gave him a firm nod. I will. Naruto jumped away from Lee and his clones, going the way he had seen Sakura go chasing after Sasuke. Naruto traveled for a good 15 minutes when he finally found his teammates in a clearing. Sasuke was standing in front of Sakura as he held her by the neck. Sakura had a large gash on her cheek and a busted lip. Her eyes darted to the blonde and Sasuke followed her gaze as he let out a sinister smile. He dropped Sakura as he turned to fully face the blonde. I almost gave up on waiting for you, Naruto. Sasuke said as he gestured to their pink-haired teammate. Sakura was helping me test out my new power, but unfortunately she was only able to do so much. I'm glad I'll finally be able to test myself against you, Naruto. The two glared at each other as they began to walk in a circle. Eventually, Naruto was standing next to Sakura. He created a clone and had it pick her up to take her away. Wait, Naruto, you have to help him, he's not himself. Naruto ignored Sakura as his clone took her away. What? Not going to listen to your dear Sakura? No, My mission is to bring you back to the village, so Sasuke, I'm only going to ask once, come back to the village. Sasuke let out a sneer at the blonde. Go back. Go back. No. They've been holding me back. Sasuke shouted at the blonde. With Orochimaru's teachings, I'll finally be able to kill Itachi. You're a fool if you think Orochimaru is going to just give you power for free. Spat back the blonde. I know that, and I don't care. I'd sell my soul to him if I get to achieve my ambition. Naruto jumped back as Sasuke ran at him. The two began a taijutsu exchange and Naruto ducked under a punch from Sasuke and kneed him in the chest as a response. The raven-haired teen grabbed onto Naruto by his vest as he twisted and threw him out the clearing. The blonde spun in midair and saw he was thrown off a cliff leading down to a river. Naruto landed on the water when Sasuke appeared above him, his hands in the tiger. Fire style. Phoenix flower jutsu. Sasuke spat out 6 small fireballs from his mouth. Naruto ran through his own hand seals and cut the flow of chakra from his feet, his body weight making him descend into the water. Water style. Raging waves. Naruto unleashed his jutsu just as his head submerged, propelling himself downward as the fireballs exploded on the surface of the river. Naruto made 3 clones and had them spread out as he saw Sasuke land above him. Pushing chakra into his feet, he shot up out of the water and uppercut his raven-haired foe. Sasuke backflipped and had his Sharingan activated when he landed as his eyes darted below the water's surface. Sasuke jumped back as 3 jets of water collided where he had been standing on previously. Naruto, seeing Sasuke was in the air, ran at him and tried to punch him. Sasuke grabbed the outstretched fist and used it to maneuver himself so he could throw a kick at the blonde's head. Naruto spun away, avoiding the hit as he retaliated with a kick of his own that caught the genin in the face and sent Sasuke crashing into the cliff side. Sasuke rubbed his chin as the flame-like markings began to cover his entire body. This is good. Sakura was useless. Now I can test myself before heading to Orochimaru. Let's go. Naruto. Sasuke rushed the whiskered blonde who was on the defensive. His old teammate attacked with vigor and the blonde couldn't find an opening to attack. Thinking quickly, Naruto blasted chakra from the bottom of his foot, creating a small geyser. The blonde used the opening to land a punch to Sasuke's chest before he was hit by a kick to the stomach. The two jumped away from each other as Sasuke threw out several shurikens. Naruto stepped back as he created 3 clones. Using the smokescreen, Naruto pulled out his own shuriken and threw them at Sasuke as he ran through hand signs. Ninja arts. Shuriken shadow clone jutsu. Naruto's clones batted away the shuriken Sasuke threw as dozens of Naruto's own shuriken burst out of the smoke. Sasuke jumped up to the cliff side to avid the shuriken when he started going through some familiar seals as he took a deep breath. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. Sasuke unleashed a massive fireball at the blonde and his clones. That's a big fireball. Naruto quickly went through the same hand seals as his clones started going through a different set. Fire style. Great fireball jutsu. Naruto spat out his own slightly smaller fireball as his clones finished their jutsu. Wind style. Great breakthrough. The wind jutsus powered Naruto's fire, increasing its size and intensity. The 2 fireballs clashed and were in a stalemate for a second before Naruto's fireball began to push Sasuke's back. The raven-haired teen's eyes widened when he noticed his jutsu was losing ground fast. Acting quickly, he descended down the cliffside as he felt the heat of the blonde's flame above him, making him feel uncomfortable at how close the heat felt. Sasuke then threw more shuriken that circled around Naruto and his clones. Naruto's eyes widened when he and his clones were pulled together as steel wire closed around him. His clones were dispelled and Sasuke spun the blonde around and smashed him onto the shore. Naruto saw Sasuke put the wire into his mouth as his hands flashed with an unfamiliar jutsu. The blonde saw the tiger seal and began going through his only water jutsu, thanking whatever deity that was listening that his hands were free to use his jutsu. Fire style. Dragon flame jutsu. Sasuke's fire jutsu followed the wire and Naruto could feel the heat already stinging his face. Naruto finished his jutsu as the flame was 3/4 of the way to him. Water style. Raging waves. Naruto started pumping liberal amounts of chakra even as he felt his reserves starting to deplete after so many chakra-intensive battles the last 2 days. The 2 jutsu created a thick steam that covered the area. Naruto created a single clone and substituted with it as he hid himself in the mist. Naruto could hear a sound he had heard only once before back in Wave Country. Naruto saw Sasuke walk up to his hand encased in lighting as he let loose low chuckle. At least Kakashi managed to teach me one useful thing. Goodbye, Naruto. Sasuke shoved his lightning-covered fist through the blonde who let out a silent scream before dispelling. Sasuke's eyes went wide when he saw it was a clone. Naruto, seeing his chance, channeled earth chakra into his arm as he came out of the mist and delivered a devastating right hook that sent Sasuke tumbling alongside the river bank before he hit a large boulder. Sasuke got up slowly, his eyes burning with anger. When very slowly the two Tomo in the Uchiha's eyes became three. Naruto. Sasuke growled out as he ran at the blonde. Naruto saw the world shift and everything came back into focus when he was knocked back by Sasuke's fist. Genjutsu. Naruto saw Sasuke rush him again. He once again threw a punch, this time Naruto blocked with his forearm. Sasuke reacted by grabbing his arm and pulling the blonde forward. While Naruto was off balance, Sasuke struck the Chunin with a knee to the ribs. Naruto felt his ribs fully break, as they had never fully healed from his fight with Kazuma. Sasuke vanished from Naruto's sight as he was suddenly sent skyward. Naruto felt Sasuke appear behind him as he channeled earth chakra into his leg as he spun, avoiding Sasuke's punch and kicking the raven-haired teen in the chest, sending him crashing into the water below. Naruto landed and body flickered to Sasuke, who was getting back on top of the river. Naruto quickly created two clones. The first clone kicked Sasuke into the air as the second clone started going through hand seals. Naruto himself jumped off the first clone's back and he grabbed Sasuke by the ankle before throwing him back into the depths. The clone then put his hands on the surface of the water and released his jutsu. Lightning style. Electromagnetic murder. The lighting surged as Sasuke let out a scream underwater. Naruto landed as his clones dispersed, breathing heavily, feeling the stress of the last couple of days starting to catch up as he felt the last of his reserves run dry. Naruto felt Sasuke's killing intent moments before he was grabbed by the neck and slammed into the cliff side by the enraged Uchiha. Naruto felt his vision go blurry as he stared at his teammate. His skin had darkened to a grayish hue, his lips were now a dark blue, and he had two hand-looking wings sprouting from his back. How are you so strong? Sasuke pulled the blonde back and slammed him back into the cliff, sending hairline cracks across the cliff wall. Naruto saw Sasuke's Sharingan eye start to spin and he felt his chakra being disturbed as Sasuke tried to place Naruto into a genjutsu. Naruto was fighting it as best he could when he heard the deep booming voice of the Nine Tails reverberate in his head. You will not fall to an Uchiha. The Nine Tails chakra surged and the genjutsu was violently broken. Naruto felt the chakra course through his system, revitalizing punched Sasuke away. The traitorous genin used his wings to stabilize himself midair. Naruto launched himself at Sasuke as a shroud of chakra bubbled to life around him, taking the vague shape of a fox. Sasuke wrapped his wings around himself when Naruto brought down a massive chakra claw down that sent Sasuke into the water once more. Naruto created 5 clones as he landed on the water's surface as Sasuke recovered from being hit again. What the hell are you, Naruto? The whiskered blonde didn't say anything as he began to form a Rasengan in his right hand. Sasuke, seeing this, began to channel lightning chakra into his left hand as the sound of thousands of birds chirping could be heard. The two locked gazes before taking off at the same time. Just as the two were about to clash, Naruto shoved his Rasengan into the water and destabilized it, causing an explosion that sent Sasuke along with a tremendous amount of water into the air. Sasuke tried to stabilize himself again only to be hit by a wind jutsu from one of the blonde's clones. Sasuke was sent slamming onto the river shore. The raven-haired teen didn't get a chance to get back up when 2 more of the blonde's clones kicked Sasuke back into the air, where the final 2 clones fell onto him, hitting him with their own jutsus. Rasengan. The dual shouts rang out as Sasuke rocketed back to the river shore, causing a crater. Naruto walked to where his teammate had landed and saw 2 spiral marks that dug into his teammate's back as his skin coloring slowly went back to normal. A clone of Naruto went up and confirmed that Sasuke was knocked out as Naruto let out a sigh of relief. The Nine Tails chakra receded and Naruto stumbled as exhaustion hit him like a sledgehammer. Naruto tied Sasuke up and slung him over his shoulder as he started making his way back to the village. The trek was slow going as the blonde was running on fumes by this point. The days of constant battle and travel with no rest was too much even for his grotesque stamina. The sky was darkening and Naruto felt the first drops of rain begin to fall. Naruto could see the bone spikes the sound ninja Kimimaro had made when his instincts flared. He dropped his captive and was about to turn around when he was hit in the back of the head. The blow sent him to the ground as he heard the voice of someone he was quickly starting to hate. Now Naruto. I can't have you interfering any longer. Lord Orochimaru won't be happy if you take Sasuke back to the leaf. Naruto sat up shakily as he watched Kabuto pick Sasuke up. The rain was starting to pour now and Kabuto adjusted his glasses with his free hand. Kabuto, Orochimaru's right-hand man smiled as he jumped up into the trees. I must be going, but I will leave you with a gift. Kabuto threw a kunai in front of Naruto. Tada-lu. Naruto heard sizzling as his vision shot down to see an explosive tag attached to the kunai. Naruto used the very last of his energy as he tried to body flicker away. Naruto felt the explosion hit his back and he threw a kunai to the back of Kabuto's head. Unfortunately, his aim was off and he missed Kabuto. There was a silver lining, he had managed to hit one of Sasuke's eyes. Naruto collided with a tree as he felt his vision blurring. His consciousness started to fade as he used every ounce of his willpower to stay awake. Damn it. Just as Naruto passed out because of his injuries, he was a small pug in leaf ninja attire land next to him with the sound of clashing steel sending him off to a dreamless sleep. It was the first thing Naruto saw when he woke up. The blonde had rarely been in the hospital because of his amazing healing factor growing up, but he would never forget how the rooms smelled. The blonde noticed his right arm was lightly wrapped in bandages along with his head. He looked outside and saw the moon was shining brightly in the night sky. The blonde slowly got out of bed feeling his body protest slightly, his various injuries aching. Naruto grimaced, not used to feeling so hurt. Slowly he made his way to the closed window. The Chunin stared at the village and he saw the last of the stragglers headed home for the night. Only the occasional ninja would pass by this part of the village at this time of night. Naruto opened the window and sat on the ledge as his eyes closed. There was a soft breeze that came by and ruffled his hair and brought fresh air into the stale hospital room. He glanced at the clock hanging above the door and the blonde saw it was 1 a.m. Naruto looked around his room and saw a nightstand with a lamp on the right side of the bed. Closer to the door were 2 chairs. The one closer to the door had his clothes neatly folded along with a scroll that no doubt held all of his supplies. There was a door in front of bed that no doubt led into a bathroom. Naruto slowly made his way to the chair near the door as he examined his clothing. His shirt was a mess as it was littered with holes and tears from his back-to-back battles. The rest of his clothing was in no better shape. The blonde then began to change into his regular clothing sans his flank jacket, which was no doubt in the scroll. Damn it. Naruto grit his teeth as his thoughts went back to his final waking moments after capturing Sasuke. His hands clenched into fists as he could feel his frustration mounting. After his fight with Kazuma and a 6-hour dash to find the retrieval team, the blonde had been tired. The fight against Kimimaro had left him exhausted, and his fight with Sasuke had left him running on fumes as even his tremendous chakra reserves had been pushed to the very limit. The blonde sneaked out his room and saw the hallway was mostly empty. He eventually found the nurses' station where 3 nurses were going in and out of rooms checking on various patients. The blonde waited and soon all the nurses left to check on patients and to deal with other duties. Naruto went over and started to look through patients and eventually found the names of all his injured comrades. Neji and Choji were still undergoing surgery, it seemed. Kiba was resting as in room 302 and Sakura was in room 309. Both would be kept overnight before being released. Shikamaru and Tenten had been discharged after getting their injuries treated as they had no major injuries. At least everyone made it out alive. Naruto thought as relief surged through his tired mind. He set the charts down as he started making his way to the exit after avoiding the nurses doing their rounds. The wind hit the blonde once again as he stepped outside, the roads being illuminated by the moon. Naruto started walking towards one of his favorite spots in the village. The trip took him a good half hour as the blonde walked at a leisure pace, just enjoying the night air. It was a very different from the stale air of the hospital. Naruto slowly sat down on top of the fourth's head looking out into the village. The blonde's hand rose to his stomach as thoughts drifted to his father. Kazuma knew who my father was the moment I used the Rasengan. If he could figure it out, others are sure to find out as well. Naruto closed his eyes as he laid down when he felt another person sit next to him. He opened his eyes to see Jiraiya staring out into the village. Tsunade is going to kick your when she notices you left the hospital, kid. The whiskered blonde shrugged. I don't like staying in the hospital. Jiraiya let out a soft chuckle. Yeah, well, be prepared to get pummeled next time you see her. Naruto let out a sigh, wondering why the Sannin were all so weird. He clenched his fists as he thought about Orochimaru and his own wayward teammate. I heard about Sasuke. Jiraiya looked at his student as various emotions began cycling through his eyes. I had him. I was on my way back to the village when Kabuto showed up. I was already drained from all of my previous fights and I couldn't do anything when he blindsided me. The white-haired man put his hand on the blonde's shoulder. Sometimes these things happen on missions. We weren't expecting for all of you to meet such heavy resistance. You probably saved the Akamaikis and the Hyugas lives. Both of them were in critical condition and the rest of the retrieval team suffered minor damages. You did a good job. Guy's pupil Lee told us how you fought Kimimaro. He was one of Orochimaru's best agents. Naruto grabbed the first Hokage's crystal with his left hand. He was a monster. He completely outclassed Lee and I. We didn't even defeat him. He died on his own in the middle of the fight. Lee and I. Naruto paused as the grip on the necklace increased. We would have died otherwise, we got lucky. But you survived. That's all that matters sometimes in this world. Naruto frowned but didn't say anything as the two sat on top of the fourth's head. What's going to happen to Sasuke? I wasn't in the council meeting when it happened, but from what I heard, he will be officially declared a missing ninja. He'll have a bounty put on his head, alive only. There was a lot of debate on whether or not to mark him as a rogue and instead of marking him as kidnapped, but the parents of the clan heirs that went on the mission, especially the Akamaiki and Hyuga clan heads, put their foot down. Naruto sighed to himself as images of the darkened, winged form Sasuke had taken during their fight. What's going to happen to the Sound Village? Now that they have Sasuke, council will want to get him back, right? Normally we would have sent a team to go retrieve him. Unfortunately, things are starting to escalate with the Stone Village. Naruto felt his stomach drop at Jiraiya's serious face. This actually brings me to the main thing I wanted to talk to you about. I was planning on taking you on a training trip so you could handle the Akatsuki when they come for you. Good news is you have 3 years to prepare. The bad news is that the training trip likely won't happen. Things are heading towards war, and I'm currently the only S-rank ninja in the village aside from Tsunade. Jiraiya had a sad look on his face. And you being the container of the 9 tails means we will both need to be on the front lines. Naruto closed his eyes tightly, his grip on the crystal tightening, his knuckles going white from the pressure. I'll be ready if they need me. Jiraiya sighed. Nothing is certain yet, but you need to prepare yourself mentally if war does break out. You're on leave for the next 2 weeks, so we'll be using the opportunity to help you polish up your techniques. We also need to work on your speed. Naruto nodded and Jiraiya stood up. Training starts in 2 days at 7, so use the next 2 days to heal up. The Toad Sage jumped to the third's head. You should talk to Kakashi, Naruto. He was the one who found you and brought you back to the village. Don't stay here all night. Naruto watched as Jiraiya left in a body flicker and began to stand up himself, and he slowly started making his way to his apartment. Naruto enjoyed waking up and just staying in bed. It was a habit he tried to avoid making, but on rare days where he had nothing planned, he allowed himself to just bask in the comfort of being wrapped up by his blanket, or he would have, if it weren't for the loud knocking coming from his door. With a weary sigh, Naruto got up from under his blanket wearing nothing but his pajama pants and his sleeping cap. Naruto rubbed his eyes as he opened the front door to find an irate Ino with a hand on her hip. Nope. I'm too tired to deal with this. Naruto closed the door and turned around to go back to his bed when he heard Ino explode from the other side of the door. Naruto, you better open this damn door right now. Said blonde let out a tired sigh, resigned to the fact he was getting no more sleep this morning. The blonde made a single shadow clone as he stepped into his kitchen while his clone went to let Ino inside. Grabbing a pot and filling it water, Naruto prepared 2 cups to make tea. While he grabbed the cups, he received the memories of his clone being slapped out of existence. Naruto poured the hot water into the cups as Ino came into the kitchen area and sat in his chair with a huff. You know, it's rude to shut the door on your guests. Naruto set the teacup in front of Ino before making his way over to the free seat. Ino, it's 7 in the morning. The blonde gestured to the clock on the wall. Ino's face was deadpan as she looked at the clock. It's 10:30. The blonde looked at the clock and confirmed it was indeed 10:30. More importantly, why aren't you at the hospital? I went to check on all of you this morning, and after I found out that you were all back from your retrieval mission only to find out you had snuck out. Naruto took a sip from his drink, trying to prolong having to answer, knowing that his answer of, "I just don't like hospitals," wouldn't cut it. Naruto contemplated his answer as he slowly lowered his teacup to the table. I saw a black cat in my room, so I had to walk around the village 7 times to get rid of the bad luck. Naruto looked at as a bewildered expression came to her face. His own face was stoic, but on the inside, he was hitting himself for using such a stupid excuse. So, you left the hospital because you saw a black cat? Ino stared at Naruto, who took a sip from his empty cup as he nodded. That's right. And then you had to walk around the village 7 times. Yup. Even though you were injured enough to be hospitalized. Ino was full on glaring at the blonde by now. It sounds bad when you say it like that. Ino rubbed the bridge of her nose as she let out an irritated sigh. You're an idiot. Naruto shrugged. He had been called much worse for less. How are you feeling? Does anything hurt? Ino scanned the blonde, but the only thing she saw was another scar running across his chest. She let out a frown as Naruto noticed her gaze. I didn't get that during the last mission. Ino blushed, a bit embarrassed she had been caught staring. When did you get it? Naruto huffed as he thought about the mission to get Tsunade and how it had been him getting his beat by 3 different S-rank ninjas. Jiraiya brought me along with him on his mission to go find Tsunade. We had an encounter with Orochimaru and well. The blonde gestured to the scar Ino had never seen. After that, Jiraiya and Tsunade drove him off and we came back to the village. Ino nodded along while she listened to the short retelling of his experience. Ino let out a snort as Naruto narrowed his eyes at her. What's so funny? You have the worst luck on missions. Sakura told me how you guys ended up running into Zabuza during your first C rank and you ran into Kazuma during our mission too. Naruto thought about it and realized she was right as his eyes widened. Every time I go out of the village I get attacked by a rogue ninja. His shoulders slumped thinking about how unlucky he was. Ino let out a giggle seeing the blonde react to his sudden epiphany. The blonde got out of his funk as fast. In the end, it didn't matter how many times he got attacked, he would kick all their asses. Did Choji's surgery go? Naruto's sudden question brought a somber mood over the 2 blondes. He's going to be fine. He's gonna be stuck in the hospital for the next week so they can monitor him just in case though. You saved his life, you know. Ino stared directly into the blonde's blue eyes. Naruto looked away, unable to hold her gaze. I'm just glad my clone made it in time. The 2 blondes sat in silence when a knock was heard from the front door. Ino looked at Naruto and his state of dress. Go get dressed, I'll answer the door. Naruto nodded as he looked at himself. He had hoped Ino would leave after confirming he was fine. As much as he enjoyed her company, the blonde was hoping to have a lazy day in. Goodbye, sleep. Naruto thought as he made his way to his room as Ino got up and went to the front door. Naruto looked over his wardrobe and decided to wear a simple orange t-shirt and black shorts. As Naruto began to undress, he had another realization. Shit, if whoever is out there wants to come inside and talk, I'll be out of chairs. Naruto began to dress himself and he heard 2 voices in the living room. I should probably go buy more chairs eventually. The blonde finished dressing and opened the door to find Ino heating the water as Sakura sat in his chair. She looked very tired with heavy bags under her eyes. Hey Naruto, you weren't at the hospital this morning. The whiskered blonde made his way over to the empty seat. How are you feeling, Sakura? Naruto said, completely avoiding the question about his whereabouts. The pink-haired Kunoichi sniffled as Ino brought her the steaming tea. I'm a little sore, but the medics patched me up and got rid of all the bruising. Sakura grabbed her cup with both hands and her knuckles turned white from how tight her grip was. I also feel so useless. Ino began to rub Sakura's back. Hey now, don't get down. That mission should have gone to a group of Chunin, not Genin. You guys did what you could. Ino's words caused Sakura to let out another sniffle. I know, but I wish I could have helped more. Sasuke was just toying with me and that white-haired sound ninja would have killed me if Lee hadn't shown up. That man was a monster, Sakura. Lee and I could barely keep up with him. The 2 girls looked over at Naruto, who was resting his head on his right hand. Then how did you win? Asked Sakura. We didn't, came the blonde's blunt reply. We survived long enough for him to die on his own. Sakura looked down at her cup. What happened to Sasuke after you rescued me? The blonde let out a long sigh as his expression darkened thinking about what happened. I managed to capture Sasuke and was on my way back when Kabuto snuck up on me and landed a sneak attack. After that, he took Sasuke and left. Sakura didn't say anything after that when she noticed the blonde's mood soured. The trio stood in an awkward silence that was only broken when the blonde stood up. Well, I'm hungry. I'm going to go find a place to eat. Ino and Sakura followed the blonde and the three began heading for the village center. As the trio was walking, Naruto spotted a certain orange book on sale and was reminded of Jiraiya's words from last night. I should really go thank him. The platinum blonde spoke up after 10 minutes of walking. Hey, we should go to this barbecue place Asuma-sensei always takes us. Sakura titled her head to the side before nodding. Yeah, I could go for some barbecue right now. How about you, Naruto? The pink-haired woman turned to her blonde teammate. Yeah, that's fine. I'll meet you guys there. I just remembered I needed to do something. With that said, the blonde immediately body flickered away, startling the two kunoichis. The blonde reappeared near training ground 7 moments later. In the distance, he could see the memorial stone and its most frequent visitor. The blonde walked to stand next to the masked Jonin. I'm glad to see you had no major injuries. I was lucky that the worst I had was chakra exhaustion. My chest is still sore, but that will go away soon enough. The two-leaf ninjas stood in silence as the wind picked up, rustling the nearby trees. I'm sorry, Naruto. The blonde glanced at his sensei from the corner of his eye. I should have been a better sensei to you and Sakura. Kakashi let out a humorless chuckle. The one student I did focus on ends up betraying the village. Naruto sighed internally. Kakashi had been a terrible sensei, but he hadn't done it out of spite or hate. If anything, he wanted to get rid of Sasuke first so he could concentrate on himself and Sakura. It's not your fault he left, sensei. Sasuke had a lot more problems than what you were equipped to deal with, and honestly, you can only do so much for someone if they don't want to change. Kakashi nodded slowly. Jiraiya told me you two would be training these next 2 weeks. That's right, we're going to be working on my physical conditioning and polishing what I know. If you want, I could stop by and help. Only if you stop by to help Sakura train too. Kakashi I smiled at the blonde. I was already planning on it. Don't worry, Naruto. I won't make the same mistake again. Naruto looked away from his sensei and scanned the memorial stone, seeing all the names carved onto it. There's probably going to be more names added soon if things with stone continue to deteriorate. The two-leaf ninja fell into a comfortable silence. The week had been going well for the whiskered blonde. Both Jiraiya and Kakashi had driven the blonde into the ground with training. Jiraiya would make him do multiple exercises only to randomly attack him and begin a spar so he could work on his instincts. Kakashi had been working with the blonde's clones. Each day he would work on a single jutsu, trying to lower the number of hand seals required to cast them, along with helping the blonde switch between the different chakra natures. Naruto was currently laying in his bed, his body sore and beaten. Jiraiya, it seems, does not like to hold back during spars. The blonde was beginning to doze off when he heard the cry of a hawk. Naruto looked at the bird flying high above the village in a figure 8, and knew it was a message for all Chunin ranked and above ninja to gather on top of the Hokage monument. All Chunin receive a scroll with their flank jacket that explained all necessary information, such as evacuation routes, outpost locations, and a list of messenger hawk flight patterns. Naruto got dressed in his gear, and as he noticed the countless figures moving in the shadows, all of them headed in the same direction. The whiskered blonde was soon standing next to hundreds of other leaf ninjas, all gathered around Shikaku Nara. Naruto saw that the Jonin had all gathered as well, and that they were standing behind Shikaku, who dropped down to one knee. All the gathered ninjas followed suit as Tsunade walked to stand in front of her assembled forces, an unreadable expression marring her face. Jiraiya, who was walking behind Tsunade, had a grim expression. The mood was tense as everyone waited for the Hokage to speak. The Stone Village has declared war on us. There was absolute silence after the declaration. No one dared to speak. Not a single person even dared to breathe. Earlier today, a squadron of sound ninjas attacked one of our Anbu bases near the border of Waterfall. The tension rose several notches as anger spiked across the crowd. We have reinforced border patrol with regular forces already, but I need every single person to go home and prepare yourselves. Tonight the council and the elite Jonin will be making plans on how to proceed, but we will be establishing several outposts closer to the border for rapid response. This is a serious matter. There will no doubt be many clashes, but we will stand tall and Stone will regret messing with us. Dismissed. Naruto saw many of his comrades leave with grim faces, and as he walked back to his apartment he thought back to the memorial stone and dreaded to see how many new names would be added to it during the duration of this conflict. Okay, so this is progressing nicely. I have plans on how I want to play this next arc, cause I didn't want to have the 2-year time skip with Jiraiya and Naruto running around the elemental nations doing jack all. And as they say, experience is the best teacher, at least it will be for Naruto. I'm not gonna lie, I had a scene in my mind for a while now and it's just so ridiculous I had to put it in. Omake. Naruto's world. Kabuto had been watching the fight between Naruto and Sasuke closely. Naruto had just taken Sasuke out by slamming his Rasengan into the river and delivering a devastating combo that had knocked the Avenger out. But something was off. During the fight, Kabuto saw inconsistencies, punches that should have hit the blonde only for him to be just out of reach, kunai that just appeared out of nowhere in the blonde's hands. The young medic watched as the blonde picked up the knocked out Uchiha and began walking away. Kabuto began to follow the blonde. Honestly, he hadn't expected to be needed. The fact that Kimimaro failed surprised the silver-haired teen greatly. Kabuto took a position above the two teens, slowly gathering chakra into his hand, and without warning, he sprinted at the blonde. Kabuto neared his prey and swung, his hand going to his neck in an attempt to sever his spinal cord, but just as his hand made contact, both teens vanished from sight. What the hell? Thought Kabuto as he quickly looked around trying to find his targets. He quickly found them off in the distance, with Naruto placing Sasuke next to a tree. His back was to the medic, and as he turned to face the sound ninja, Kabuto froze the moment red eyes locked with his own. What is this? Kabuto started shaking as dread filled his being. The medic had been used to being blasted with potent killing intent, something that was unavoidable working with Orochimaru, but this was completely different. This was some primal feeling of being in front of a superior predator. Kabuto took in the appearance of Naruto, who looked different from the last time he saw him. His hair was slicked back with 4 spikes coming forward, he looked slightly more filled out, and his eyes. They were the eyes of an apex predator. Kabuto. His voice was smooth and sensual, it didn't sound anything like the boy he knew. Swallowing any and all apprehension, the medic knew he couldn't return to Orochimaru without Sasuke, so he acted. Using a body flicker, Kabuto rushed the blonde, intending to slice his throat. Kabuto was alarmed. The blonde clearly tracked his movements but didn't move to retaliate, he only smiled, revealing sharper than normal canines. Before Kabuto could land the blow, he was sent hurtling through several trees. He shakily got up and moved forward to trying to figure out when the blonde had moved. Whatever happened to the blonde to change him had put him in a class of his own. He didn't even know if Orochimaru could defeat the blonde as he was. Oh, you continue to approach me even after realizing how outclassed you are. Lord Orochimaru requires young Sasuke. Kabuto cursed himself for stuttering. The blonde let out a small chuckle to a full laugh. Very well, then do try to take him. Naruto had an ear-to-ear grin as he stared down the medic. Kabuto was overcome by pure terror and he turned around to try and flee, only to end up in the same spot where he started. What? How? Laughter once more filled the clearing as Naruto spread his arms out. This has been fun, Kabuto, but it seems like we need to end this. Company shall be arriving soon and I am not ready to reveal myself yet. Kabuto turned around again to try and flee. He took 2 steps before he heard the blonde speak again. Zawaruto. Kabuto felt himself fall to the ground, only his body had remained where it was. As the darkness started consuming him, he saw the red-eyed blonde laugh as he consumed the blood from his headless body. 1 month had passed since Tsunade had delivered the news of the Stone Village's attack. The Leaf Village had taken immediate action and established 3 bases of operations on its western borders. Outpost Alpha was one of 3 bases made at the border of Fire Country and its 3 neighbors. Waterfall, Grass, and Sound. Outpost Alpha was set up near Grass Country and all of the major supply lines coming east ran through it. Outpost Alpha was the least active of the three bases in direct combat. Outpost Beta was technically in Waterfall and was set up as a joint outpost with the Waterfall Ninja to help secure their country. Outpost Delta was the last of the three outposts and also the largest of the three. It was set up near the border of Sound and had already engaged enemy squadrons 3 separate times in large-scale battles. Waterfall had sided with the Leaf Village as they had an ongoing defensive pact. Sound and Stone had allied together as well, allowing the squadrons of Stone ninjas to directly attack the Fire Country without having to go through the hostile Waterfall Village or the neutral Grass Country. The Sand Village had been silent, though they did claim neutrality from the whole affair, still reeling from their losses during the Sand Sound invasion. The Cloud Village had only increased some of its patrols and made no other moves, though relations were tense. The Hidden Mist Village was still dark. What little information they could get out was about the civil war starting to reach its climax. The other minor villages followed the Sand Village's example and declared neutrality. It had been 3 weeks since Naruto had been deployed to Outpost Alpha. So far the blonde Chunin had been sent out on 2 escort missions, where he and a squad of 10 Chunins guarded a caravan of supplies coming from Wind Country. So far things had been quiet. The only enemy activity had been a scout near the border. Jiraiya had been put in charge as commander of Outpost Delta. He was deployed there along with many of the Leaf's heavy hitters, as it was currently the most active area in terms of combat. Kakashi had been made commander of Outpost Beta, where he ran hit-and-run operations to disrupt the supply lines of the Stone Village along with doing recon of Stone Village outposts. They had conducted 2 raids so far. Inoichi Yamanaka, Ino's father, had been made commander of Outpost Alpha. He was also currently one of 3 Jonin who were assigned to the outpost. Naruto walked around camp taking in the scenery. There was a large number of tents set up as makeshift shelters. Large walls of earth were made with earth jutsus to protect the outpost and hide it from view. There were dozens of Chunin running around blending with one another as every single one was wearing their mandated attire. The blonde was wearing the typical Chunin uniform plus his orange sash. It was the most he was allowed to deviate from the dress code now that wartime protocols were put into effect. Naruto had spent most of his free time at camp working on his nature chakra transformation. He had been channeling different chakra types into his kunai to see the effects they had. Earth chakra was the one he was most familiar with, as it was the one he had the most experience with when he channeled it into his arms. It made the kunai harder and heavier than normal. Naruto knew the earth chakra enhancement would work better with blunt weapons, like a staff or club. Wind was his most powerful affinity, and it was obvious when he began using the wind-infused kunai. It could cut stone easily along with increasing penetrating power. The blonde had tried to channel fire chakra through his kunai just once. He had burned himself. His control with fire was still not good enough for anything other than basic fire jutsu. Water, in his opinion, was the hardest to control. He could extend the water in a whip from the tip of his kunai. Unfortunately, it required tremendous amounts of concentration and made it basically useless in battle for him. Lighting had a similar effect to that of wind. It made cutting easier but not to the extent that wind had. Where it had truly shined was its penetrating power. It could go through solid stone like it was made of butter. Although he had encountered a problem that was similar to the one he had with water, it took him about 4 seconds to properly channel the chakra through the kunai. That was unacceptable. A battle could be decided in that amount of time, especially with enemies like Orochimaru, Itachi, and Kisame, who could all move and react at ridiculous speeds. As Naruto continued to walk around the base, he saw that many of his allies were in the large communal tent that was mainly used for meals. The majority were playing card games and just talking. The blonde let out a small sigh. His gaze lingered on all of his laughing allies. Naruto was the youngest person in camp by far. The closest person in age to him from what he could determine was a Hyuga that was 3 years older than him. Naruto had tried talking to him, but it was like talking to a brick wall that had a tendency to glare at you. The Hyuga really need to learn to relax, thought Naruto with a sigh as he walked past the communal tent and went to his assigned tent. Naruto shared the small space with 5 other Chunins, all of them in their late 20s. It was very awkward for the blonde. Some of them held hidden resentment when they looked at him. Be it from jealousy from him being a Chunin at such a young age or the fact that they knew he housed the 9 tails, either way, it made it a very uncomfortable experience for the young blonde. If there was one thing he regretted about being promoted, It was the age difference with him and the rest of his comrades. The average age of most Chunin was 22. It was a difference of almost 10 years. It wasn't unheard of to be promoted at an early age. His own Jonin sensei was proof of that, but most stayed with their genin teams until all three either got promoted or the remaining genins retired. Things were more complicated for him now that one of his teammates had gone rogue. Not that he had planned on staying with them, but the breakout of war threw everything out of order. Even if he had planned on staying with his team, that option was now closed. The thought of the war reminded the whiskered blonde of his lifelong tag along. He had been very upset since the war was announced. Not that Naruto could blame him. He wasn't thrilled with the prospect of 2 of the 5 fighting. He had tried to talk to the fox on multiple occasions since he had been deployed, but the most he ever got was an angry huff or an annoyed growl. If Naruto didn't know any better, he would say the ancient beast was sulking. The blonde closed his eyes as he drifted off to sleep, wondering when the 9 tails would talk to him again. The next morning, Naruto woke up and went to one of the 3 designated training areas right outside the walls of the outpost. Everyone was expected to train to keep themselves in shape, but no intensive training was allowed. You never knew when you would be called away on an emergency mission. Naruto had a major advantage compared to everyone else. He could train harder than everyone at the outpost and not be negatively affected because of his healing factor. The young Chunin was using training weights he had acquired from Gai Sensei before being deployed as he ran around the field for his warm-up. The weights were special as they would increase in weight up to a certain limit whenever he added chakra to them. They were great as he could deactivate them in relatively fast in case of an attack, though he never wore them outside of training. There was no reason to take additional risks, especially during a war. Sweat dripped off the blonde as he ran laps around the clearing. Naruto stopped and to catch his breath before sitting down to begin his meditation. It was his usual routine during his days off at the base. He would get up, run laps, then meditate for an hour before practicing his taijutsu. He would end his training session by working on his nature chakra. He was interrupted from his meditation when he felt someone walking towards him. Naruto opened his eyes as a black-haired Chunin stood in front of him. He looked to be in his early 30s and had a scar under his jaw. He looked slightly annoyed and his tone showed as much. Uzumaki, you've been called by the commander. As soon as he finished talking, the man left. Naruto let out a sigh as he got up. It was hard to not get angry with some of his comrades when they acted like that. Unfortunately, there was nothing he could do as being unpleasant wasn't a crime. It was frustrating though. Very, very frustrating. After a short walk, Naruto stood in front of Inoichi with a group of 12 other Chunins. The older blonde was going over paperwork in the commander's tent. His face was set into a small grimace that pronounced his wrinkles. He continued reading the report for another minute before finally addressing the gathered ninjas. Hello gentlemen, I've called you here because we received some troubling intel from Outpost Beta this morning. One of their scout teams picked up the trail of an enemy squad during one of their patrols. After locating the squad of stone ninja, they followed them up to the point where they crossed into grass country. From the direction they were traveling, we think they will attack our supply caravan currently crossing through grass country. The team deployed to escort that caravan has only 3 members. It was decided after some careful planning that all of you shall meet up with the caravan. Your mission is to make sure the supplies cross into fire country. Your second objective is to ambush the stone squadron should they try to attack the caravan and try to take at least one of them hostage. You have 30 minutes to prepare yourselves. The faster you make it to the caravan, the better. Supplies have been rather limited, especially with how suddenly the war sprung up. The teal-colored eyes of the Jonin fell onto the Chunin standing off to the right. He had black hair with gray eyes with a scar running along his jawline. It was the same Chunin that had come to retrieve Naruto. Chunin Honda, you shall be in charge of this operation. The now named Honda saluted Inoichi. Of course, Commander. We won't let you down. Inoichi nodded. I know you won't. Good luck all of you. Dismissed. Naruto and the remaining Chunin saluted Inoichi and left to go to their respective tents to prepare. Naruto had everything prepared already thanks to his various sealing scrolls, so he sat in his bed and began to meditate. He had taken up the habit again as a way to center himself. The last 3 weeks had been a grind and the blonde had no good outlet for his stress. The half hour passed quickly and the blonde made his way to the meeting spot. Naruto met the rest of his group consisting of 5 kunoichis and 7 ninjas. There wasn't anyone Naruto could recognize, though 1 or 2 seemed familiar to the blonde. Honda cleared his throat and all the gathered Chunin gathered around their team leader. Listen up. This mission isn't going to be easy, but we can send a message to the Stone Village that we won't be outmaneuvered by them. It'll take us a good part of the day to reach our destination. We'll be camping about a half a mile away from the main caravan, so we won't be lighting any fires during the night. Naruto saw that plenty of his fellow Chunins looked agitated by the announcement, though none dared to voice their displeasure. Once we reach the caravan, we need to be on alert. The stone ninja may strike at any moment. Honda's gaze traveled across the group. Naruto noticed it stayed on him a split second longer than anyone else. Let's get going. With a chorus of, "Yes, sir," the team was off. The journey was slow. Chunin Honda decided that they needed to be in perfect shape if they encountered the stone squadron, so they moved at a leisure pace. The sun was high in the sky when Honda decided to take a short break for food and water. Naruto sat on a low-hanging branch when he felt the all-too-familiar tug on his navel. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again he was standing in front of his tenant. The Nine Tails looked down at his container. His massive tails swayed back and forth behind him. There was a tense silence as the two stared at each other. Naruto, unable to stand the silence, finally spoke up. "Yo, you wanted to talk." The Nine Tails stayed silent. His gaze continued to observe the young blonde. "Naruto, you need to be careful, something is coming." The blind blinked once, trying to comprehend what the fox was saying. He had been silent for a month now, and his first words were a warning. It was concerning. "What do you mean?" The Nine Tails huffed in annoyance. "You know about your ability to sense things before they happen, yes?" Naruto nodded, confused by the sudden change of the topic. "Yeah, it's saved my life on more than one occasion. Did you know that each of my siblings gives special abilities to their hosts? Each of you has things in common, such as an increased healing factor, though yours is more advanced thanks to your Uzumaki heritage. But we each have unique talents that are, for a lack of a better word, inherited from us. Shukaku, as you know, allows for his host to control sand. The Four Tails allows their host to use lava." Naruto's eyes widened at hearing that. A small part of him was jealous that the Four Tails allowed its host to be able to use something as cool as lava. "I, on the other hand, have a more subtle ability, one which in my opinion, is the most useful of the 9. I can detect negative emotions. If you were actively using my chakra, you would see that your ability to sense things around you would increase tremendously. I guess I should thank you then." The Nine Tails lowered his head to better look at his host. "You shouldn't. The ability, as I explained, is passive. More importantly, I sensed something dangerous up ahead." The blonde frowned. "I'm in the middle of a mission right now. We're going to intercept a stone squad, so it's probably that." The giant fox narrowed his eyes. "I wouldn't be warning you if I thought you would be facing the normal fodder you've encountered. Do you know what the threat is?" "No. If I were outside of the seal, I would be able to be more accurate. Unfortunately, my ability to sense the outside world is limited. The war going on does not help either. Negative emotions are flaring all over, covering the land in a blanket of hate and sadness. I'll be extra careful." The Nine Tails curled up and faced away from the blonde. "Good. I don't need you dying on me yet." Naruto let out a small smile as he watched the Nine Tails. "Thanks for warning me, I appreciate it." The fox didn't respond verbally, but he did make a "go away" gesture with one of his tails. Taking the hint, Naruto concentrated and was back outside of the seal. Returning from his subconscious was always disorienting. Time moved slower in the seal, and it always made coming back weird. Naruto looked around to gauge the amount of time he had spent in the seal. The majority of his teammates were still eating, so not much time must have passed. The blonde thought about warning Honda about what the Nine Tails had said, but he didn't think that it would go well. Naruto brought out a ration bar and began eating to get rid of his growing hunger. He didn't know when the next time they would be able to rest. A loud whistle tore through the silence as Honda stepped into the center of the clearing. "Listen up, team. We won't be stopping again until we get into grass country, so be prepared for a long journey. If we keep going at our current pace, we should reach the border not too long after nightfall. We leave in 10 minutes. Honda turned to talk to one of the older Chunin after he made his announcement. They both went over to a stump with a map of the area with various spots marked on it. Naruto brought out his canteen and to wash down the tasteless ration bar. He let out a grimace as he thought about the possible threat laying ahead, especially if it made the old fox warn the blonde. I hope I don't run into Orochimaru again. The blonde began rubbing his chest where his scars crossed. I don't need another scar from the thoughts of Orochimaru led him to think about his former teammate and the traitorous medic. I hope we run into Kabuto though, I need to pay him back. I doubt I'll run into Sasuke anytime soon, with how much effort the snake put into getting him he probably won't leave Orochimaru's side. The squadron of Chunin finished their rest and marched on. The landscape around them began to change as the daylight began to fade. The lush forest of Fire Country was slowly being replaced as the trees began to thin in numbers as more and more open grass fields replaced them. By the time the sun set, the scenery changed completely to open grasslands with the occasional tree thrown in. Honda raised his hand from his spot in front as the group came to a halt. We're about a mile away from the rendezvous point, so we'll meet up with them tomorrow. I'll go there now to make contact and establish a battle plan. Tomorrow, once we meet up with the escort team, 3 of us will travel along with them, but the rest of us will be trailing them far enough away that the enemy stone squad won't see us. If they attack the caravan, we'll come up from behind and take them out. For now, set up camp. We'll be taking 1-hour watches in pairs. Draw lots to see who will be taking watch. Honda turned and left after that as the remaining Chunin began to set themselves up. Naruto set up a small tent that was almost completely hidden by the tall grass. Seeing this, Naruto began to pull long strands of grass to cover the top of the tent that was visible. Many of his fellow Chunin saw and copied his example. Eventually, after everyone was set up, the older Chunin who had been next to Honda the entire journey spoke up. Okay, I've numbered pieces of paper from 1 to 12. Everyone come and get one. Those who get a blank piece are lucky and don't have to do watch. There was some grumbling, but soon enough everyone went over and pulled a piece of paper from what appeared to be the Chunin's bandana. Naruto got his piece of paper and looked down to see the number 11 written on it. Okay, we'll keep it simple. Numbers 1 and 2 get the first watch, 3 and 4 get the second watch, and so on. Naruto felt a tap on his shoulder and turned to see brown-haired Chunin. He was fairly plain looking, with the only thing that stood put was his height. He was almost as tall as Jiraiya. Hey, what number did you get? Naruto flipped his paper around to show the tall Chunin. I got 11. Well, it looks like I'll be waking you and your partner up. I got number 10. My name's Aijin, by the way. The now named Aijin stuck his hand out. The blonde, seeing the gesture, took his hand in his and shook. Naruto Uzumaki. Aijin let out a small smirk. I know. I saw you during the invasion. You did good work out there. Anyway, we should meet our partners. I'll see you around. Naruto. Aijin walked away and the whiskered blonde looked around, seeing everyone was grouping up. After asking around, he finally found his partner. Looking closely at the kunoichi, who was wearing a large coat that obscured her figure. She had black eyes and medium-length hair. She was also a good 3 inches taller than Naruto, who shot up a couple of inches during the last couple of months. She stood at a decent 5 feet 7 inches to his now 5 feet 4 inches. Hello. My name's Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto extended his hand out. The kunoichi looked at him for a solid 5 seconds before she slowly grabbed his hand. Greetings. I am Josei Aburame. Naruto looked down to see that Josei had not shaken his hand. She was simply holding it. The blonde slowly shook her hand as she observed silently before pulling back. So, do you know Shino? Yes. Naruto waited to see if she would elaborate, but she didn't. After a couple of very awkward seconds, Naruto tried to continue the conversation. So, how are you guys related? He is my second cousin. There was another awkward silence that stretched on between the two Chunin. Naruto looked around to see if there was anything he could spot that would spark conversation, and after several attempts of short and clipped responses, he decided it was a lost cause. Right, I'll be over at my tent if you need anything. I'll see you tonight for our watch. Naruto walked away at a brisk pace as Josei continued to look at him. Man, what a weird girl. Naruto went to bed before long and was awoken by a sleepy Aijin. The blonde spent the next hour failing miserably trying to talk to Josei. Eventually, their watch ended, and not long after the sun rose, everyone was up and awake. Honda looked at 2 other Chunin to accompany him to be out in the open, the older Chunin he had been talking to the entire trip, and Aijin. Okay, People, Kensai and I went over a map of the region and there are 3 prime locations for an ambush. These areas are the most dangerous and as we pass these locations I will give you a signal so you are all aware. Stay alert at all times though, we never know when and where they could attack from. The rest of the squad followed them at a distance and after a short trip met up with the escort team. The 2 teams continued the journey when they saw the road went under a cliffside. Honda stretched his arms up over his head, it was the signal the group had devised to warn them about possible ambush sites. Naruto watched the entire area like a hawk to see any signs of enemy movement. The blonde did not have to wait long as a thin wall of earth sprang up in front of the caravan. 10 figures jumped down from the cliff, all of the hidden leaf ninjas brought out shuriken and kunai and threw them at the backs of the 10 figures. All 10 went down immediately as they were hit with a rainstorm of shuriken and kunai, blood splattered and as the figures fell over dead. Honda went over to inspect the bodies and gave the all-clear signal. Naruto approached the bodies with the rest of his team. They're young. The blonde let out a grimace as he gazed at the dead bodies of the stone ninja. They can't be older than 11 years old. Naruto turned when he heard one of his older teammates curse. Those stone bastards. They did the same thing during the last war, they would send in fresh genins to psyche out our squads. Listen up. We travel as a group now but stay alert, let's keep going. Honda spoke as the entire squad along with the escort team began to travel. The hours passed slowly as the scenery became more flat and open. Naruto was behind the caravan along with Josei and Ijin when he felt a sudden sense of dread overcome him. The blonde broke out into a cold sweat as they heard Honda yell out from the front of the caravan. Halt, who goes there? Naruto shared a look with Ijin and Josei as they made their way around the caravan to as all their allies looked out to see Honda walk near a giant hooded and cloaked figure. Hello, I am afraid that the caravan can no longer proceed. The cloaked figure replied. Honda went to go reach for his kunai but before he could the man moved faster than they could see and Honda fell over clutching his slit throat. The cloak fell off to the side and scarlet red armor could be seen covering the giant man along with a stone village headband. The other Chunins brought out their weapons and surrounded the red giant who looked upon the circling Chunin with an air of utter disinterest. His voice reverberated across the clearing as he addressed the Chunins. My name is Han, and your journey ends here. For a moment, a single moment, the world stood still. Han's declaration along with the ease of him killing Honda had shocked the remaining Chunin to their cores. Han, seeing the lowered guard of the Chunin, moved at a blistering speed to the nearest enemy. Appearing in front of a shocked Kensai, Han twirled his kunai and jammed it through Kensai's throat. With a sharp twist the kunai was ripped out as nearby Chunins were splattered with blood. The soft thud of Kensai's body hitting the ground stirred the shocked leaf ninjas into action. Twin cries of rage rang out as 2 ninjas tried to stab Han from either side. Naruto watched on as Han once again moved almost too fast to track. With lightning reflexes he grabbed the wrists of the 2 ninjas and with a mighty heave he pulled the 2 closer and made them stab each other in the chest. The 2 dropped dead as a black-headed kunoichi rushed Han from behind. She took a deep breath and unleashed a torrent of fire at point-blank range. The flames completely enveloped Han and for a split second the remaining leaf forces were given hope that their enemy was defeated. That hope was broken as Han's hand shot out of the fire covering the kunoichi's mouth as terror shone in her eyes. Han lifted the woman and slammed her into the ground with such strength the ground cratered. He's a monster. Naruto heard Ijin whisper in horror next to him. No, he's just an S-class ninja. Naruto couldn't help but reply. He had encountered many S-class ninjas but they all had one thing in common. They either needed him alive or were playing with him and his team. The red monster was the first S-class ninja who the blonde had met aside from the crippled Orochimaru who was simply there to kill them. A sense of dread overcame Naruto as he saw how utterly outclassed they all were compared to Han. Han, who was standing over the dead kunoichi, spun around as earth spikes sprang from behind him. With a wide swing of his arm, the spikes were broken and rendered useless as the 3 Chunin from the escort team sped towards the red giant with their weapons drawn. As they got closer Han closed his eyes and his chakra spiked before Naruto could shout out to warn his comrades. Han opened his eyes and spoke. Boil style. Scorching mist. Just before the 3 leaf ninjas could land their attacks, thick steam erupted from Han's armor surrounding him and the escort team. Cries of pain echoed across the clearing before they were cut off one by one. Han exploded out of the mist and landed a crushing kick to another ninja. A resounding crack could be heard as his chest caved inward and the ninja was sent flying away from the remaining Leaf forces. Oh my god, Josei said as she fell to her knees in shock as her insects began to buzz around her in agitation. Han, hearing the teen, raced over to the downed kunoichi and raised his fist in preparation for a strike. Naruto bit the inside of his cheek so hard he tasted blood and buried his feelings of dread and despair deep inside himself. He began to gather chakra into his right arm and moved faster than any previous time of his life. Han, who was mid-swing, suddenly stopped and shifted his arm to cover his face as a black fist impacted into his armor. The stone ninja's eyes widened when the force of the blow made him take a step back. Using the opening, Naruto sent a kick that sent Han skidding back a few feet. Naruto quickly created a clone that picked up Josie and took her away from battle. The blonde's instinct flared like never before as he channeled tremendous amounts of chakra to reinforce his body as his arms came up to just barely in time to block a lightning fast strike from Han that sent the younger man through the caravan they were tasked with escorting. Naruto hissed in pain, his arm feeling like it had a mountain dropped on it. Fox, I need your help. Anything you can offer would be great. Naruto thought as once again his instincts flared, his eyes snapped to the sky where Han was. Steam exploded from the back of his armor as the red giant propelled himself down. Boil style. Erupting strong foot. With a quick body flicker, Naruto got out of the way as Han dropped down from the sky, obliterating the caravan and all of the supplies. Naruto took a glance around to see how the rest of his comrades were holding up. Most were shaken, some were angry, but everyone was ready to fight. Out of the original 18 ninja, 7 were dead and Josei was too disturbed to continue. He saw another pair of Chunin rush the wreckage. Wait. Don't get close. Naruto tried to warn his comrades, but it was futile. They were too overcome with rage to listen to him. Han blasted out of the wreckage and clotheslined the 2 ninjas, sending them crashing into the ground, clutching their throats as they desperately trying to inhale air. Without hesitation, Han brought down his hands in a double chop to the necks of the downed ninja, ending their suffering. Gritting his teeth in anger, Naruto felt an outpour of the Nine Tails chakra. His injuries healed and the chakra began to form a shroud around him, with 3 tails forming behind him. Han's head snapped straight to the now red-eyed blonde as he burst forward and hit Han away from his remaining allies. Naruto felt the fear of his comrades as they stared at him, but the blonde didn't care right now. The biggest threat was the armored giant who was staring at the blonde in an almost melancholy manner. To think, I would end up fighting Kin. Han let out a sigh before he was slowly enveloped in a shroud of crimson chakra, and an aura of death was felt as Han's killing intent skyrocketed. Naruto felt his heart stop. Another Jinchuriki, but one who was already leagues above the blonde even without the use of his tenant's chakra. Han disappeared from Naruto's sight, and the next moment the only thing Naruto could feel was pain. It took a moment for the blonde to reorient himself. He was laying in a trench and he felt the damage to his injured chest being healed rapidly by Fox's chakra. Naruto saw Han walking forward slowly, a single tail swaying behind him. Naruto looked around and saw that the remaining Chunin were all on their knees from Han's killing intent. The blonde poured all the chakra he could as he shouted his signature jutsu. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. The clearing was filled with thousands of copies of the blonde. Each clone lacked the chakra shroud but had a feral look, indicating that they had the Nine Tails chakra coursing through them. Dozens of clones charged Han, who began to effortlessly dispel them at an alarming rate. Naruto took deep breaths. He had used up the majority of chakra the Nine Tails had given him, along with a good portion of his reserves, to summon the clones, and his shroud of chakra went from 3 tails down to 1. The blonde made his way quickly over to Aijin and Josei, who had grouped up with the remaining Chunin during the blonde's scuffle with the stone ninja. The group looked at the blonde warily, but Naruto didn't have time to waste over any petty feelings of unease. Naruto looked to Aijin, who was the most composed of the group. You need to head back to base now and warn them about Han. Aijin looked at the blonde as if he was crazy. You can't expect us to leave you here to fight him alone. Naruto let out a grimace at the thought of facing Han alone. None of you stand a chance against him. I at least can distract him long enough for you guys to escape. Aijin opened his mouth to argue before another older Chunin placed his hand on his shoulder and spoke to him. Naruto is right. This has become a battle between Jinchuriki. We would only get in the way. Our top priority right now is letting the base know about Han. Naruto turned around to when a clone notified him of Han heading towards the group. The blonde grit his teeth as he once again began to gather chakra. His clones had made a circle around the older Jinchuriki, but Han had just broken through. Naruto began to channel wind chakra into his kunai before launching it at the charging stone ninja and blazing through hand seals. Kunai Shadow Clone Jutsu. The single kunai was soon joined by dozens of identical copies. Han, sensing the danger, spun in place as a wave of steam and chakra went forward and knocked the incoming kunai out of the way. Aijin, Josei and the rest of the Chunin took the opportunity to leave. Han once again resumed his charge. Naruto, seeing this, formed a Rasengan in and began to pump more and more chakra into it as he met Han's charge with his own. It began to increase in size until it was 3 times larger than a regular Rasengan, though unlike a normal Rasengan, this one was unstable and Naruto struggled to maintain its form. The red-clad warrior brought up his arm and steam began to pour out of it. As the two neared, they locked eyes before bringing their attacks forward. Rasengan. Boil style. Erupting propulsion fist. The two attacks met and the two stood even for a fraction of a second. Naruto's Rasengan collapsed and exploded as Han's fist tore through the condensed chakra, striking the young blonde in the face as he was sent flying. Han was also sent tumbling back once the explosion caught up with him. Naruto shakily stood up as his vision began to blur. The remaining clones began charging Han once they saw their creator being sent flying. Each clone formed an unstable Rasengan as they began throwing themselves at the older Jinchuriki, who was quickly swallowed by a tide of exploding Rasengans. Damn it. This hurts. Naruto raged as he looked at his bleeding right arm. There were deep gashes all over it from the exploding Rasengan. Even with the Nine Tails regeneration, it was healing very slowly. Naruto took the moment to catch his breath while his clones distracted Han, who was looking slightly worse for wear as a big crack could be seen on the chest plate of his armor. Han then let out a roar as he spun and 3 tails extended, destroying any nearby clones. In the same fluid motion, Han pierced the ground and water surrounded the kneeling man. Naruto acted without thinking once he felt his instincts flare. Earth style. Mud wall. A small but thick wall of earth rose in front of the blonde when he heard Han shout his technique. Boil style. Steam explosion. Naruto felt the ground shake as superheated steam flew across the clearing, destroying all of his clones. The wall of earth that protected the young blonde crumbled as a hand broke through and latched onto Naruto's throat. Han's grip was as strong as steel. The blonde could see he was back to 1 tail. Naruto saw his vision darkening as Han slammed him into the ground. Just before the blonde could lose consciousness, he felt the all-too-familiar tug in his navel. The damp ground of his seal was a welcome break from the confrontation with Han. Naruto looked at the seal and saw the 9 tails observing him with a calculating look. You're losing. Naruto looked at the giant fox with a stoic face. Really? I hadn't noticed. The blonde tried to keep the sarcasm out of his voice, but the stress of the situation got to him. The 5 tails container is strong, far stronger than you. Did you drag me in here just to mock me? 'Cause I kinda have a giant angry red man to deal with that is in the middle of strangling me to death. The 9 tails narrowed his eyes and let out a huff of annoyance. Oh, and what exactly were you planning to do to escape? The blonde grit his teeth, knowing that he couldn't have done anything. I brought you here to let you know I'm going to be giving you more chakra. Naruto looked at the fox in curiosity. Then why bring me here at all? A small, almost sinister smile formed on the ancient fox. I'll be giving you 4 tails worth of my chakra. A sense of weariness erupted from the blonde. And why is that any more special than the other times you've given me chakra? You have noticed that you become more aggravated when you use my chakra, yes? Naruto nodded. It was impossible to miss how his emotions, especially his anger, would spike. The effects of my chakra grow exponentially from the 3rd to 4th tail. Not only that, but your sensory range for my ability also increases dramatically. The worst part is that now you'll unlock more of my ability. Naruto's eyes widened. Before, it hasn't been an issue, but once you enter the 4th-tailed stage, it will be active until you stop using my chakra. The blonde felt his heart hammer. What kind of monstrous ability did the 4th tail unlock? What's the ability? Asked Naruto with trepidation. The great fox lowered himself so he was eye to eye with the young blonde. Empathy. The blonde stood in silence for a while, trying to process what the fox had said. Empathy, repeated the blonde, his tone conveying doubt. The 9 tails looked at Naruto with annoyance. Yes, Empathy. The Nine Tails said, his tone taking a hard edge. Once you use my fourth tail, you will be able to constantly sense negative emotion, not just the spikes of malcontent the enemy has when they attack. So now imagine feeling every negative emotion from miles around. Their anger, their sadness, their fear, their greed, their guilt, their hate. The Nine Tails paused, giving Naruto time to digest the information. You'll experience everything as if you were experiencing it yourself, tell me, Naruto. The red eyes of the Nine Tails seemed to intensify as they gazed into the blue-eyed human. Do you think that my ability is something that can be easily brushed aside? The tension in the air was palpable and Naruto was tempted to look away, but a steely determination manifested in the blonde and he held the fox's gaze. I can do it. The fox didn't say anything and the two stood in silence for what felt like an eternity. Then the silence was broken as the Nine Tails shifted his many tails. We'll see. That was the final thing Naruto heard before he was swallowed by a tidal wave of red chakra. The Chunin's eyes snapped open as he sent a kick to Han's torso, sending the older Jinchuriki flying back. The blonde landed on all fours and he was about to rush Han when he suddenly stopped. Pain. He felt the pain of hundreds of people all around as they struggled to survive. Anxiety. He felt the anxiety of those who worried about getting caught up in this war, of soldiers wishing they wouldn't have to go to the front lines. Envy. He felt the envy of the populace who wished they lived in the walled settlements of the hidden villages. Anger. He felt the anger of those who wished that the war never started to ruin their peaceful lives. Fear. He felt the fear of the soldiers who wanted to go home and of the civilians who hoped their loved ones wouldn't get caught in an attack by an enemy army. Hate. So much hate. Naruto felt the hate the leaf had for the invading stone ninja. He felt the hate and resentment of the stone ninja who still suffered from the last war. He felt the hate of the adults who cursed both villages for fighting a war that had nothing to do with them on their land. The blonde clutched his head as tears started to fall from his eyes as he tried to comprehend all the new emotions he was experiencing. The blonde vaguely heard Han in the background let loose a roar of rage. Without thinking, the blonde jumped back as he felt a spike of anger, sorrow, and hate directed at him. The action snapped the blonde out of his anguish as he now had a target for all of his emotions. Han landed in the spot the blonde occupied moments before, five tails swaying behind him. I've had enough of this, you're far too much trouble. Naruto felt another rush of chakra as a fifth tail grew, he felt a rise in aggression and for a moment he could only see red. Letting out a war cry, the younger Jinchuriki rushed his older counterpart. Naruto could see Han dodge and duck under his furious flurry of clawed swipes and kicks. This only caused his anger to rise and he redoubled his efforts. Han ducked under another swipe from an extended chakra hand and launched his own chakra fist that sent the savage blonde tumbling away. Enough! Han shouted as Naruto got back up. You have no control, you can't win against me. But seeing how stubborn you are, let me show you just how outclassed you truly are. Han's tone became darker as he finished his sentence. Naruto was about to rush the stone ninja again when an explosion of chakra tore the clearing all around them. The blonde shifted his stance as he braced himself and he watched as Han enveloped himself in a sphere of pure chakra. There was a pulse from the sphere which created a creator, and Naruto was snapped out of his anger-induced haze as every single survival instinct he had made him want to run away. Slowly the sphere broke apart to reveal a miniature five tails. Han now looked vaguely like a horse with an elongated head, his entire body was a crimson red and his eyes looked like pools of glowing ivory. This is what is called a version 2 cloak. It's something only Jinchuriki with a mastery over their beast's chakra can achieve. Naruto shivered. Han's voice didn't sound human anymore. Naruto took half a second to think about his options, knowing running away was impossible, so he did what felt most natural. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. The clearing, which was torn up from the clashing Jinchuriki, was for a second time that hour filled to the brim with clones. That won't work, Han said as he raised himself to stand on his hind legs before bringing his hoofs down, sending a shockwave across the clearing, dispelling many of the newly created clones. Naruto started to panic as the remaining clones began to throw every jutsu they had in their arsenal at Han in the hopes of doing damage. Han was bombarded by a rainstorm of fireballs, wind blasts, kunai and lightning bolts. The older Jinchuriki did not even acknowledge the jutsus being thrown at him as he ran through every attack as if it didn't exist, ramming clone after clone as he rampaged. Han was approaching the real Naruto, who felt the frustration getting to him at being unable to even hurt the older Jinchuriki, so he began to form a Rasengan. The blonde began to pour unholy amounts of chakra into it as it grew steadily in his hand. He had a clone stand next to him to help stabilize the growing sphere as Naruto continued to pump the Rasengan with more and more chakra. The Rasengan was taller than the blonde and just as wide when the blonde had finished fueling it with chakra. Naruto jumped in the air as several of his clones rushed and latched themselves to Han to hold him in place. Rasengan. The giant Rasengan slammed into Han and the clones retraining him instantly dispelled. Naruto felt the Rasengan begin to dig into the earth, taking Han along with it, but the progress stopped abruptly and then Naruto felt himself being pushed back as the Rasengan was being lifted into the air by big white horns. Naruto was then flung through the surrounding trees as his Rasengan fell apart as his concentration faltering. The blonde slowly threw a log off himself as he stared at the fully transformed Han. Single quote. Naruto thought as he stared at the fully transformed Jinchuriki taking the form of his prisoner, the five-tailed dolphin horse. Naruto brought his thumb up to his mouth where his elongated fangs sank into his flesh, going through the necessary hand seals to be able to summon some help. Summoning jutsu. There was a giant cloud of smoke which soon revealed the Toad Boss. Before Gamabunta could question his appearance, he had to dodge a headbutt by jumping high in the air to avoid the charging Han. What the hell? Is that the Five Tails? Naruto, who was clinging to the top of Gamabunta's head, shouted at the Toad Boss to get his attention. I'm sorry, Bunta. I didn't know what else to do to try and deal with him. The Toad let out a gruff tisk as he had to dodge the charging Han once more. Well, there isn't much I can do, but I'll help where I can. You owe me some barrels of sake, brat. Thanks, Bunta. Naruto watched as Han continued to run forward before turning around and dashing back, trampling large areas of the forest. Gamabunta once again jumped up to avoid the transformed Jinchuriki, only for Han to jump as well. In the air, Han spun, swinging his tails at the boss Toad. Gamabunta grunted in pain as he was sent flying away by the impact of the tails. Damn, he's fast. Naruto couldn't disagree. Han was on them the second they landed, and so far Gamabunta was lucky to escape so unharmed. Then Han did something that took the blonde by surprise. He jumped straight back and away from the duo. He then brought his five tails above his head where little orbs of chakra began to gather into a black orb. Naruto felt his instincts flare again. Whatever that orb was, it wasn't good. Shit. He's too far to stop. Hold on, kid, it's about to get bumpy. Naruto looked back and forth between the Toad Boss and Han. What is that? The Chief Toad didn't have time to reply. Han decided it was an appropriate time to unleash his attack and he brought his head forward. Naruto's vision went white for a moment as felt the intense movement of the Chief Toad as he dodged whatever the attack was. There was a deafening blast and the earth shook from the impact. Naruto saw his vision return and looked back and saw the utter devastation the attack had left behind. There was a long trench formed from the trail of the attack leading to a mountain. Naruto felt his legs almost buckle. The mountain was missing its upper half. The blonde finally fell to his knees when an influx of emotions reached him. Terror, fear, and panic filled his being as he felt hundreds of people reacting to the aftermath of Han's attack. Naruto was brought back by the voice of Gamabunta. That was the tailed beast bomb. It's the tailed beast's strongest attack. Naruto looked back at Han and his heart stopped for the second time that day. Han was about to fire another blast. The ball expanded without warning into a beam. Gamabunta let out a curse as he desperately jumped to the side to try and avoid the attack. Naruto heard the boss Toad scream in pain as the beam managed to catch the Toad's left arm, incinerating it along with a good portion of the surrounding forest. Gamabunta fell to the ground clutching his stump arm before he was dispelled from the damage he sustained. Naruto tumbled to the ground at the sudden loss of his living platform before having to body flicker away to avoid a giant hoof of Han. Steam enveloped Han as his body began to shrink back into his five-tailed version 1 form. There was total silence that was only broken by Han's heavy footsteps that echoed across the remains of the forest. Han looked completely unharmed aside from a single crack in his chest plate. Naruto grit his teeth in an attempt to curb his anger, which was amplified by the emotions of others inside his sensory range. Han dashed forward and brought his fist in a downward strike, and the blonde couldn't move fast enough to block. His body was sent crashing into the ground, and before he could get up, Han kicked the blonde in the chest, sending him rolling away. Naruto felt the Nine Tails chakra heal his injuries, and his vision went black for a moment as his chakra levels dipped. All the raging emotions of the villagers and ninjas suddenly went quiet, and the Naruto could think clearly again. The blonde looked back and saw he only had 2 chakra tails. That's not good, Naruto thought as he moved his arms in an attempt to pick himself up, only to stop as searing hot pain erupted from his muscles. Holding back a shout of pain, the blonde forced himself to his feet despite the protest of his body. Looks like you've reached your limit. Han's voice was back to normal, and Naruto glared at the approaching figure as he continued to talk. Our bodies weren't made to use the beast's chakra. It takes years of dedication and practice before the negative side effects no longer affect you. Han was about 20 paces from the blonde at this point. The beast's chakra has incredible healing properties, but did you know it's also incredibly corrosive to humans? The more chakra we channel, the bigger the effect. I knew that I couldn't defeat you if you started using more of your prisoner's chakra than what you were already using. Out of the 9, the one you contain is on a level of its own. Luckily, I just had to wear you out to the point your body could no longer handle channeling its chakra. Han was 10 paces away when he was hit by a searing blast of fire that knocked him away, and the blonde felt a sense of relief overcome him. Look at this, Kakuzu. Lord Jashin has blessed us. Looks like we've got a 2-for-1 deal on the demon containers. Naruto's head snapped back to where the attack had come from, and standing there were 2 people with black cloaks and red clouds. Naruto couldn't believe it. The Akatsuki had shown up.